Welcome to Anana's creation. Tonight, we begin a story set not in the ancient hills of Greece, but in the misty towering forests of the Pacific Northwest. A story of obsession, reflection, and the echoes we leave behind. Our story begins in Cascade Ridge, Washington. Cascade Ridge isn't just a town, it's a statement. Nestled in the green foothills just outside Seattle, it's a protected enclave of new money and old-growth trees. The houses are architectural marvels of glass, cedar, and steel, designed to look at the nature surrounding them, but never truly be a part of it. Everything here is curated: the native plant gardens, the artisanal coffee shops that only serve single-origin beans, even the stylized, minimalist playgrounds. In a town obsessed with surfaces, with reflections, and with curated perfection, Ryder Vance was king. Ryder was not merely handsome. Handsome is a common word, a utility word. Ryder was curated. He was the living embodiment of Cascade Ridge's ideals. He had the kind of looks that stopped conversations. His hair was a deep, rich brown that caught the light in waves, seemingly art-directed by the misty sunlight itself. His eyes were the color of the Puget Sound on a clear winter day, a sharp, intelligent gray-blue. His features were so symmetrical they bordered on unsettling, as if sculpted by an algorithm rather than born from the messy collision of genetics. He was the only son of Linda Vance, a former model who now curated the family's social standing, and a tech CEO whose name was more famous than his face. From the moment he was born, Ryder was insulated by wealth and adoration. When Ryder was a child, his mother, Linda, ever anxious about her perfect creation, had taken him to the most expensive child psychiatrist in Seattle, a man named Dr. Terrence. She was worried about Ryder's detachment, his strange lack of need for other children. Dr. Terrence, an insightful man tired of indulgent parents, observed the boy for an hour. Ryder hadn't played with the toys. He had spent the entire session arranging them into patterns, and then, finding a mirrored wall, simply watching his own hands move. Dr. Terrence gave Linda a cryptic warning, one she mistook for a compliment. "Your son will live a long and phenomenally successful life, Linda," he said, adjusting his glasses. "He will be admired by everyone he meets. There is only one condition, one danger. He will be fine, so long as he never truly knows himself. His image is his fortress. Don't ever let him be forced to look past it." Linda had beamed, hearing only the phenomenally successful part. And Ryder was successful. He was the valedictorian at his exclusive prep school. He was the captain of the crew team, his perfect rhythmic form cutting the boat through the water like a blade. He was an Instagram celebrity, though he rarely posted. He didn't need to. Others posted for him. His feed was a collection of tagged photos, Ryder captured in profile, laughing at a party he didn't want to be at, Ryder reading in the library, unaware, or pretending to be unaware, of the camera, Ryder crossing the finish line, sweat glistening on his perfect brow. He was desired. By everyone. The baristas at the Ridge Grind fumbled his order every morning, their faces flushing red when he looked up, annoyed. The girls, and just as many boys, in the hallways of his school manufactured reasons to speak to him, just to be caught in the high beam of his attention for a fleeting second. They offered him homework, rides, their hearts. Ryder accepted none of it. It wasn't that he was cruel, not intentionally. He simply didn't understand why they tried. He found other people to be messy, loud, and disappointing. Their faces were asymmetrical. They stumbled over their words. They had needs. They wanted things from him: validation, proximity, a piece of his light. It was exhausting. He found their adoration as baffling as it was suffocating. Why would he need their clumsy affection when he had his own? Why listen to their flawed opinions when his own thoughts were so clear, so precise? His most constant companion was his reflection. He saw it in the glass facades of the downtown Seattle skyscrapers, in the mirrored surface of his phone when the screen was dark, in the still, black water of the lake at dawn before his rowing shell broke the surface. In his reflection, he saw perfection. He saw order. He saw the one person in the world who was truly worthy of his time. Just last week, Amber Harrison, the class president and a girl of considerable ambition and poise, had finally worked up the courage to ask him to the spring formal. She had caught him by his locker, her voice, usually so confident in student government debates, trembling slightly. "Ryder," she'd said, "I was wondering if you would consider going to the formal with me?" Ryder hadn't even looked at her directly. He had been adjusting the collar of his jacket, watching his own movements in the reflective silver of a nearby trophy case. He gave a small, dismissive sigh. "Why?" Amber blinked. What do you mean, why?" "Why would I go?" he asked, his voice genuinely curious, not malicious. "It's 4 hours of bad music, terrible lighting, and lukewarm chicken. And," he finally turned his gaze to her, his gray-blue eyes flat and assessing, Why would I go with you? The quiet devastation that washed over her face didn't register to him as cruelty. It was just a fact. She was not him. She was, therefore, less. He turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the hallway as the bell rang, her face a mask of public humiliation. He didn't think of her again. This afternoon, however, the adoration was becoming too much. The walls of his glass house felt too close. The constant ping of notifications on his phone, tags, DMs, friend requests, was like a swarm of gnats. He needed silence. He needed space. He needed the forest. The Kallos Wilderness Preserve, named by some long-dead founder with a love for Greek, bordered the edge of Cascade Ridge. It was a dense, primal expanse of Douglas firs, western red cedars, and sword ferns. The air there was thick, green, and damp. It was the one place the curated perfection of the ridge hadn't fully tamed. People hiked the main trails, but few ventured deep. It was too easy to get lost. Ryder wasn't afraid of being lost. He was a competitive trail runner. The forest was his gym, his cathedral. He pulled on his state-of-the-art running gear, the fabrics engineered to wick moisture and compress muscle. He slipped his phone into an armband, queued up not music, but a noise-canceling white noise track. He couldn't stand the imperfection of music. He preferred the sterile hum of the static. He drove his silent, electric Rivian truck to the trailhead. He stepped out, the gravel crunching under his expensive trail shoes. He stretched, a series of fluid-controlled movements, admiring the line of his own calf muscle as he flexed. The air was cool and smelled of pine and damp earth. A thick fog was rolling in, common for late afternoon. It clung to the trees, making the familiar trail look alien and ancient. Ryder smiled, a rare, genuine smile meant only for himself. This was perfection. Silence. Isolation. A challenge. He pressed start on his running watch and disappeared into the fog, his footsteps vanishing almost instantly. He ran, pushing deeper into the woods than he ever had before, seeking the profound silent comfort of being utterly and completely alone. He was unaware, of course, that the woods were not empty. He was unaware that someone else had sought the same solitude, for very different reasons. Someone who had once had a voice, and had lost it. Someone who was waiting, trapped in the green silence, forced to listen. The forest Ryder Vance used as his gymnasium was, for another, a fortress. Deeper in the Kallos Wilderness, 5 miles past the official end of trail sign, where the path dissolved into deer tracks and damp earth, stood a forgotten fire lookout. It was a relic from the 1950s, a square cabin perched 30 feet in the air on stilts of aging cedar. It was here, above the canopy of ferns and vine maples, that Evelyn Reed lived. 2 years ago, Evelyn Reed had been one of the most recognized voices in Seattle. She was the host and creator of The Reed Report, an investigative podcast that had toppled a corrupt city councilman and exposed a chemical company for polluting the Snohomish River. Her voice, a smooth, confident alto, was her brand. It was trusted. It was incisive. People said she could ask a question in a way that left no room for a lie. Then, she had aimed her investigation at Jenna Marshall. Jenna was the matriarch of Atlas Media, a sprawling empire of news outlets, social media platforms, and film studios. Evelyn had received a tip that Jenna's husband, a shipping magnate, was using his business as a front for a massive international smuggling ring. Evelyn, as always, followed the evidence. But Jenna Marshall was not a city councilman. She was a modern-day goddess, and she was ruthless. Before Evelyn could air her episode, Jenna struck. It wasn't a lawsuit, it was an execution. Jenna used her media empire to launch a coordinated smear campaign. Fabricated emails were leaked. Past sources were paid to recant their stories. A deep-fake audio clip emerged, seemingly capturing Evelyn trying to bribe a source. Within 72 hours, the Reed Report was pulled from every platform for ethics violations. Evelyn Reed, the voice of truth, was publicly branded a fraud. The betrayal and the public humiliation broke something inside her. The stress manifested in a bizarre, crippling way. The words, they just stopped coming. She would open her mouth to defend herself, to explain, and nothing would emerge but a strangled gasp. A therapist later diagnosed it as severe trauma-induced selective mutism, complicated by acute echolalia. In moments of high anxiety, which was now every moment, she lost the ability to formulate her own speech. She could only, involuntarily, repeat the last few words spoken to her. Her greatest weapon, her voice, had been turned into a prison. She could only reflect, she could no longer originate. So she ran. She liquidated her accounts, packed a life into 4 duffel bags, and vanished. She hiked into the Kallos Preserve and found the abandoned lookout tower. It was derelict, but the roof was sound. With a small solar array, a satellite internet receiver for emergencies, and a stockpile of freeze-dried food, she became a ghost. The world forgot Evelyn Reed. And in the silence, she became something else. She became Echo. She spent her days in silence, reading, foraging, and watching the wilderness. She rarely saw people. The isolation was both a comfort and a torment. She hadn't spoken an original sentence in 13 months. On this foggy afternoon, Echo was on the forest floor, gathering chanterelle mushrooms that sprouted from the damp earth. She moved silently, her feet in soft boots, making no sound. That was when she heard it. It wasn't the usual sound of a deer snapping a twig. It was rhythmic, heavy, and fast, the thud-thud-thud of a runner. Fear shot through her. A hiker this deep was rare and dangerous. She scrambled behind the massive moss-covered trunk of a fallen nurse log, pulling her basket in close. She held her breath, her heart hammering against her ribs. And then, he burst through the fog. It was Ryder Vance. She knew him. Everyone in Cascade Ridge knew him. He was the town's golden prince, the flawless face she saw in the window of the coffee shop when she made her dangerous, pre-dawn supply runs once every 3 months. He was the image of everything she had lost: confidence, public adoration, and effortless perfection. He wasn't running on the trail, he was attacking it. He bounded over a fallen log, his form perfect, his breathing controlled. He wore noise-canceling earbuds, his face set in a look of serene, focused determination. He was completely, beautifully, and terrifyingly self-contained. He was a world unto himself, and he was moving directly toward her hiding place. Echo pressed herself flatter against the log. Her throat tightened. Please don't see me. Please don't see me. Ryder was in his zone. The white noise in his ears blocked out the world. The fog, the trees, the ground, they were just obstacles to be conquered. He saw the massive nurse log, registered it as something to vault, and planted his foot. He launched himself over the log, flying directly over her. For one split second, he was suspended in the air above her, a perfect silhouette against the gray sky. He landed, the impact absorbed by his powerful legs, and he didn't look back. He didn't see the basket of mushrooms. He didn't see the terrified woman huddled in the ferns. He was alone, just as he wanted to be. He disappeared into the mist, the sound of his footsteps fading. Echo remained frozen for a full minute, her entire body trembling. Her heart was no longer pounding from fear, but from something else, something she hadn't felt in years. She had been in the presence of perfection. She crept out from her hiding spot and stood where he had landed. There was a footprint, deep and sharp in the soft mud. He was real. In her isolated world, where everything was decaying, damp, and imperfect, Ryder was a revelation. He was bright, sharp, and whole. He was not broken. He was not hiding. He was the exact opposite of her. He was the sun, and she was a shadow. She felt a desperate, aching pull. A desire to be near that perfection. A desire to see it again. It was the first want she had felt for anything other than survival in a very long time. Hesitantly, she looked in the direction he had gone. He was moving fast, but he was on a loop he didn't know, a loop that would eventually circle back toward the creek. She knew these woods better than he did. She could cut him off, see him again, just one more time, from a distance. Making a decision that would unravel her careful isolation, Echo abandoned her mushrooms. She straightened up, and with the silent, practiced speed of a ghost, she began to follow him, a shadow trailing the brightest light she had ever seen. The forest was Echo's home. She knew every game trail, every hollow log, every silent shortcut. Ryder Vance, for all his physical prowess, was just a visitor. He was loud. He ran with a confident, rhythmic thud that announced his presence long before he appeared through the swirling fog. Following him was easy. She moved 50 yards to his left, parallel to the trail, a silent shadow in the undergrowth. She stepped where the moss was thickest, her feet finding purchase on rocks and roots, never on a dry, snapping twig. She had practiced silence for over a year. She was a ghost in her own domain. Watching him was intoxicating. He was, as she had first thought, an object of pure, bright perfection. He was power. He was confidence. He was everything she was not. He moved through the world as if it was designed for him, a world that bent to his will. Echo, by contrast, moved through the world by bending herself to it, disappearing, accommodating, and fading. She felt a strange, painful yearning. It wasn't just desire. It was a kind of envy. She wanted to be seen by him, and at the same time, the thought of him turning his sharp, gray-blue eyes on her was her deepest terror. What would he see? A woman in stained cargo pants, her hair matted, her face smudged with dirt. A broken thing. A failure. The thought made her shrink further into the ferns, even as her feet kept pace with his. Ryder, meanwhile, was in a state of flow. The white noise in his ears was a perfect, sterile barrier. The fog was a welcome shroud, isolating him completely. This was his church. His muscles burned, a clean, satisfying fire. His lungs pulled in the cold, damp air. He felt his body as a perfect, efficient machine, every part working in harmony. He relished the feeling of leaving the curated, needy world of Cascade Ridge behind. Out here, there were no expectations. No one wanted anything from him. There were no fawning baristas, no desperate classmates, no texts to answer. There was only the trail, his body, and the run. He was entirely, wonderfully, and completely alone with the only person whose company he enjoyed. He pushed his pace, the trail beginning to climb steeply. He hadn't run this particular loop before. The trail was narrowing, becoming less of a path and more of a suggestion. The fog thickened, reducing his visibility to less than 20 feet. He didn't care. He was so focused on his own internal rhythm, on the sound of his own breathing, that he missed the small, moss-covered sign where the official trail branched left. He continued straight, onto a faint animal track. Echo, following from the ridge above, saw his mistake. She stopped. Her heart jumped. That wasn't a trail. That path followed a dry creek bed that ended in a sheer, treacherous ravine. The ground was unstable. He was so focused, so inward, that he was blind to the very real danger ahead. Her instinct was to stay hidden. His safety was not her problem. But she couldn't. The infatuation that had drawn her to him was now a terrible, protective panic. He was a perfect thing, and he was about to break himself on the rocks. She had to get closer, to somehow warn him, though she had no idea how. She abandoned her silent path and began to run, crashing through the sword ferns, trying to cut him off before he reached the edge. Ryder came to an abrupt, skidding stop. The path had simply vanished. One moment he was on solid earth, the next he was standing at the edge of a deep, misty gorge. The ground had crumbled away. He was breathing heavily, his annoyance immediate and sharp. His perfect run was ruined. The trail had betrayed him. He pulled one earbud out, the white noise hiss replaced by a sudden profound silence. The fog was so thick it seemed to swallow all sound. There was no wind, no bird calls, just the sound of his own heart and the distant, unseen rush of water from the bottom of the ravine. The silence was absolute. And then, it wasn't. From the ridge to his right, he heard a sound. A small clatter. A dislodged rock tumbling through the ferns. Ryder spun around. He was not afraid, he was angry. His solitude had been breached. Who's there? His voice was a blade, sharp and clear in the heavy air. I know someone's following me. Echo froze. She was 20 yards away, hidden by a curtain of vine maple. He had heard her. He had spoken. His voice, not filtered through a podcast or a news report, but real, hit her like a physical blow. It was beautiful. She pressed her hand to her mouth, her body locking in a panic she knew all too well. Say something. Say, I'm sorry, I was lost. Say, hello. Say anything. But her mind was a blank, white wall. The pathways from thought to speech were flooded, jammed, and broken. This isn't funny, Ryder called out, his eyes scanning the impenetrable wall of green. He was used to people playing games to get his attention. Show yourself. Echo squeezed her eyes shut. She was trapped. She could feel the words, his words, bubbling in her chest, demanding to be let out. It was a physical pressure. She tried to force them down, to say her own name. I am Evelyn. But the curse held. Ryder listened. Nothing. Just the wind, which was beginning to pick up. He scoffed, convinced it was just an animal, or perhaps his own mind playing tricks. He was about to put his earbud back in and turn around, disgusted with the interruption. Then, he heard it. It was a whisper, so faint it was almost carried away by the fog, but it was unmistakably a voice. It sounded like his voice. Show yourself. Ryder's head snapped back toward the sound. What did you say? He demanded. He waited, his heart suddenly beating for a reason other than exercise. The whisper came back, a perfect, terrified reflection of his own words. What did you say? Ryder's blood ran cold, just for a second, before the chill was replaced by a hot flash of anger. The voice was not just a whisper, it was a perfect mimicry. It was mocking him. He was Ryder Vance, and he was not to be mocked. Stop it, he commanded, stepping off the broken trail and into the thick, wet undergrowth. That's not funny. Who are you? He was moving toward the sound, his steps sure and aggressive. He was an athlete, and he was fast. From behind the curtain of ferns, Echo heard him coming. She heard the heavy, angry crunch of his footsteps on the forest floor. He was hunting her. Panic, cold and absolute, seized her. She tried to scramble backward to get away, to disappear, but her feet, so silent moments before, were now clumsy. She tripped on a gnarled root and went down, landing hard on her hands and knees in the cold mud. The sound of her fall was loud in the silent woods. "Got you," Ryder's voice was closer now, laced with smug irritation. "I'm coming up." Echo heard her own voice, a pathetic, terrified whisper, escape her lips before she could stop it. "Coming up." A second later, the curtain of green was torn aside. Ryder pushed through a thicket of vine maples and stood over her. He froze. She froze. The silence that followed was heavier and more profound than the fog. Ryder stared down, and his mind, so quick and analytical, struggled to process what it was seeing. He had expected a rival runner from another school. He had expected a starstruck fan from town, a girl who had followed him, hoping for a meet cute. He had even, for a moment, considered it might be a park ranger, angry he was off trail. He had not expected this. The creature kneeling in the mud was a woman, but she seemed more like a feral thing. Her hair, a brown he might once have called pretty, was a tangled, matted nest of leaves and twigs. Her face was streaked with mud, save for the clean tracks where tears were now silently tracing paths down her cheeks. She wore an old oversized flannel shirt, ripped at the elbow, and cargo pants stained with dirt and berry juice. But it was her eyes that held him. They were wide, terrified, and full of a desperate, piercing adoration. She was looking at him not as a person, but as a pilgrim might look at a shrine. This combination, her filth and her worship, was, to Ryder, profoundly repulsive. His entire life was a monument to curated perfection. He hated mess. He hated neediness. He hated the raw, unfiltered, and broken parts of humanity. And here, kneeling at his feet, was all of it, embodied in one person. He took an involuntary step back, a look of pure, undisguised disgust twisting his perfect features. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice no longer angry, but cold and clinical. Are you one of those squatters from the river?" Echo was paralyzed. He was here. He was real. He was more beautiful and more terrible than she could have imagined. His gray-blue eyes were like chips of ice. She tried to answer. She tried to say, "I'm Evelyn. I live here." "I'm not." But the words were gone. Her throat was locked. She could only stare, her heart breaking as she saw the revulsion in his face. "Why were you following me?" Ryder demanded, crossing his arms. "What do you want?" His words hammered at her, demanding a reply. The pressure built, and her own voice, her real voice, was nowhere to be found. The only words available were his. "What do you want?" she whispered, the sound a ragged breath. Ryder's face hardened. The mimicry, which had been annoying, was now, coming from this thing, simply bizarre. "You're mocking me," he stated. Echo shook her head violently, a sob catching in her throat. No, I'm not." But the only sound that came out was the echo. "Mocking me? Stop it," he snapped, his voice rising. "Stop saying what I say. It's creepy." The tears were coming faster now, hot and shameful. She was failing. She was ruining this. He thought she was a monster. "Say what I say." "It's creepy," she repeated, her voice cracking with a despair that was all her own, even if the words were not. She had to make him understand. She was trapped inside this broken shell, but she was in there. In a final, desperate gesture of pure, unfiltered longing, she did the only thing her body could. She reached out her hand. It was a plea, a supplication. Her hand was shaking, her fingers uncurling, caked in the dark mud of the forest floor. "See me, please. Help me." Ryder looked down at the outstretched hand. He saw the grime under her fingernails. He saw the tremble. He saw the desperate, pathetic hope in her eyes. And he felt absolutely nothing. No pity. No empathy. Just a profound, icy wave of revulsion. He had been soiled by her presence. He looked from her hand to her face. "Don't touch me," he said. His voice was not loud. It was flat, quiet, and absolutely final. "You're disgusting. Stay away from me." The words struck her like a physical blow. Her hand froze in midair. Her breath hitched. The light in her eyes, the desperate adoration, died. It was snuffed out, leaving only a hollow, echoing void. "Away from me," she whispered. It was the last thing he would ever hear her say. Ryder didn't give her a second look. He turned his back on her, leaving her kneeling in the mud. He found the game trail, his perfect sense of direction reasserting itself now that the contamination was behind him. He navigated back to the main loop, his mind already working to scrub the encounter. It was an anomaly. A piece of trash he'd found on the trail. He reached the main path, pulled out his phone, and fumbled for his earbuds. He put the one he'd removed back in, and then, finding the white noise track wasn't enough, he turned it to its maximum volume. He needed to drown out the memory of her face, her hand, and the sound of his own words coming from her mouth. He began to run again, faster this time, punishing the trail, purging the uncleanliness, leaving the silent, broken woman in the fog far behind. The fog in the ravine did not lift. It grew heavier, settling around Echo like a shroud as the unseen sun began to dip, pulling the light from the sky. The forest turned from gray to a deep, bruised purple. It was cold. Echo did not move. She remained on her knees in the mud, her hands still frozen in the air, a testament to the moment her hope had been executed. His words replayed in her mind, not in her own voice, but in his. Cold, clear, and final. "Don't touch me. You're disgusting. Stay away from me." The last sentence was the one that stuck. Stay away from me. It was not a rejection, it was a command. A new curse. Her old one, the echolalia, had been a prison. This new one was a banishment. Slowly, as the cold began to seep into her bones, she lowered her hand. She looked at it, the mud, the grime, the broken fingernails. He was right. It was disgusting. She was disgusting. She was a broken, messy, human thing, and she had dared to present herself to perfection. The part of her that had reached out, the small, flickering ember of Evelyn Reed that still longed for connection, was extinguished. It died right there in the mud. She rose to her feet. The walk back to her lookout tower was not a walk. It was a stumble, an automaton's retreat. She didn't bother with the game trails, crashing through bushes, letting the sharp branches of Devil's Club tear at her clothes and skin. She didn't feel it. When she reached the tower, she climbed the ladder, her movements stiff and robotic. She entered the small, dark cabin, and for the first time in over a year, she bolted the heavy wooden bar across the door. She sank to the floor in the darkness. Across the room, the single pane of glass that served as her window was now a black mirror, reflecting the dim, cramped interior. She saw a shape in it. A shadow. A hunched, feral outline. She saw what he had seen. And in that moment, she vowed to fulfill his command. He had told her to stay away. She would. She would erase the physical part of herself. She would become what he had already seen, a ghost. A voice in the mist. She would never, ever be seen again. Ryder Vance, meanwhile, had finished his run. He had pushed himself to the limit, the memory of the creature in the woods fueling a new angry energy. He burst from the trailhead, his skin slick with sweat, his mind clear. The encounter was purged. He threw his gear into the back of his silent Rivian and drove, too fast, through the winding roads of Cascade Ridge. He pulled into the heated garage of his family's glass and steel home. He walked into the sterile, white foyer, dropping his keys into a minimalist concrete bowl. His mother, Linda, was in the living room, directing a caterer for a party he had no intention of attending. She saw him. "Ryder, darling. How was the run? You must try this new protein bar, it's..." "Later," Ryder said, not breaking his stride. He didn't have time for her. He needed to be clean. He went to his own wing of the house. His bathroom was a sanctuary of Italian marble and chrome. He turned the shower on, the water pressure high and scaldingly hot. He stood under the spray for 20 minutes, scrubbing his skin raw with expensive, sandalwood-scented soap. He was washing away the forest, washing away the mud, washing away the memory of her filthy, outstretched hand. He was restoring his own perfection. At that exact moment, across town in a more modest, but still comfortable, part of Cascade Ridge, Amber Harrison was sitting at her desk, staring at her laptop. She was supposed to be writing a college application essay, but she was trapped in an Instagram rabbit hole. She was looking at a photo, posted by another girl from her school, that had been taken that morning. It was a candid shot of Ryder, stretching at the Kallos trailhead. The lighting was perfect, the mist framing him. The comments were a predictable, fawning disaster. Literally a god. How is he even real? Perfect. Amber felt a familiar, cold bitterness rise in her throat. She remembered his face in the hallway, the flat, bored dismissal in his eyes as he had publicly humiliated her. She thought of the other people she had seen him crush, the way he moved through the world like a wrecking ball, utterly insulated from the damage he caused. She snapped. She clicked over to her Finsta, her private, locked account, visible only to a few close friends. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. "People think he's a god," she typed. "He's not. He's just a black hole. He feeds on everyone else's light and gives nothing back. He's cruel, he's empty, and he's never, ever been hurt. I swear, I wish just once he could feel what he makes the rest of us feel. I wish he could fall for someone who will never love him back. Let him see what it's like to be obsessed with someone he can never, ever have. Let him fall in love with something as cold and empty and perfect as he thinks he is." She stared at the words. It was a bitter, hateful thought. She hit post and closed the laptop. It was just a wish, a scream into the digital void. Back in the marble bathroom, Ryder turned off the water. The room was thick with steam. He grabbed a heavy, white towel and dried himself, his movements efficient. He stood in front of the vast, floor-to-ceiling mirror. It was completely fogged over, a blank, gray slate. He wiped his hand across the center of the glass, clearing a large circle. And he looked. He had seen his reflection thousands, millions of times. He checked it constantly. But this was different. He wasn't checking for flaws. He wasn't assessing his form. He was just looking. He saw the man in the mirror. The water droplets glistening on his perfect, defined shoulders. The sharp, intelligent line of his jaw. The way his dark hair, damp from the shower, curled perfectly at his temples. And his eyes. He stared into his own gray-blue eyes, and for the first time, he saw not just himself, but a person. A person who was strong. A person who was pure, clean, and in control. A person who had never faltered, never compromised, and never, ever needed anyone else. A strange, unfamiliar warmth bloomed in his chest. It was a sudden, powerful rush of adoration. This person in the mirror, he understood. He was the only one who did. He was the only one who had never been a disappointment. He was the only one worthy of his time, his thoughts, his love. Amber's wish, her modern curse, had found its target. Ryder had rejected the world, and now the world had left him with only one possible object of desire. A small, genuine smile touched Ryder's lips as he looked at the reflection. The reflection smiled back, just as beautiful, just as perfect. He raised his hand, not to wipe away more steam, but to connect. His fingertips pressed against the cool, solid glass, tracing the outline of the face in front of him. He was mesmerized. He couldn't look away. He was, finally and completely, in love. Time, for Ryder Vance, had stopped. He stood in the steam-filled bathroom, his fingers pressed against the cool glass of the mirror. The man looking back at him was everything. He was the answer to a question Ryder didn't even know he'd been asking. This image was the embodiment of his own worth, his own purity, his own singular importance. All the adoration he had received from others had been a pale, flawed imitation of this. This was the real thing. He was in love. A sharp, impatient knock rapped on his bedroom door, breaking the spell. "Ryder? Darling, are you alive in there?" It was his mother, Linda. Her voice, usually a smooth instrument of social grace, was laced with irritation. "The caterers are here. The Chengs are arriving in 20 minutes. You can't just ignore our guests." Ryder felt a sudden, sharp stab of anger. It was an intrusion. She was interrupting him. She was trying to pull him away from this perfect moment. "I'm busy," he called out, his voice rough. He pulled his hand from the mirror, grabbing his towel and wrapping it around his waist. He felt protective. He didn't want his mother's flawed, critical eyes anywhere near this. "Busy? Ryder, you've been in that bathroom for nearly an hour. What on earth are you doing?" "I'll be out when I'm out," he snapped. He heard her huff, her heels clicking away on the hardwood floor. He was alone again. He looked back at the mirror. The steam was already beginning to reclaim the glass, fogging the image. He felt a moment of panic, of loss. He wiped it again, but the spell was broken by the interruption. He had to leave, but he couldn't bear to leave him. He went into his bedroom. It was a vast, minimalist space of polished concrete, white linens, and brushed steel. It was as sterile and controlled as he was. He walked past his closet, ignoring his clothes. He sat on the edge of his unmade bed. He picked up his smartphone. He was about to turn it on, to check the time, to see the messages he'd ignored. But his thumb paused. The screen was off. It was a perfect, black, polished rectangle of glass. And in its dark surface, he saw him again. The reflection was smaller here, darker, more intimate. This was a pool he could hold in his hands. He stared at his own face, reflected in the dark screen. "They're all just noise," he whispered, thinking of his mother, the guests, the fawning, needy people at school. He thought of the thing in the woods, the epitome of mess and decay. "They're all flawed," he said to the face in the phone. "They all want something. But you're complete. You don't want anything. You just are." Slowly, he opened his camera app. He turned it to the front-facing camera. His own face filled the screen, live and in high definition. He could see the individual lashes of his eyes. He could see the perfect, sharp line of his lips. He was transfixed. He tilted his head. The image tilted, too. Obedient. Perfect. He took a picture. The shutter sound was jarringly loud in the silent room. He opened his gallery. There he was. A permanent, captured moment of perfection. He took another. And another. He angled his face, testing the light from the window. He was no longer taking photos for social media, to be consumed by others. He was taking them for himself. He was documenting his beloved. Far away, in the deep woods, the cabin was growing dark. Echo, in her own cold sanctuary, was also dealing with reflections. She was shivering. The cold from the damp floor had seeped into her, but her movements were rigid, methodical. She was erasing herself. She found the small, cracked compact mirror she had kept in her first aid kit. For 13 months, it had been her only link to her own face. She had used it to check for ticks, to wash the grime from her face. Now, she opened it. She saw what Ryder had seen. The matted hair, the dirt, the hollow eyes. Disgusting. Her hand tightened. With a sudden, violent motion, she threw the compact into the small, cold wood stove in the corner. The sound of the plastic cracking was the only sound in the tower. It was done. But it wasn't enough. The window. At night, it was a mirror. She grabbed the heavy wool blanket from her cot. She fumbled in the near darkness for her staple gun. She began to tack the blanket over the single window, plunging the room into an absolute, suffocating blackness. No more light. No more reflections. She would be a voice without a face. She would obey his command. She would stay away. Hours passed at Cascade Ridge. Downstairs, the party was in full swing. A muted, synthesized bass line thump through the floors. Linda Vance was making excuses for her son, a tight, forced smile on her face. "He's just so dedicated, a big exam." Ryder heard none of it. He was in his room, in the dark. He hadn't gotten dressed. He hadn't eaten. The calls for dinner had gone completely unanswered. He was lying on his back, his phone held above his face. The screen was the only source of light, casting a pale, clinical glow on his features. He was not on the internet. He was in his camera roll. He was swiping, slowly, through an endless growing gallery of his own face. Hundreds of pictures, all taken in the last few hours. Each one was a tiny, perfect piece of his beloved. He zoomed in on an eye, marveling at its clarity. He studied the curve of his own smile. A new, strange, and terrible pain was growing in his chest. It was the ache of Tantalus. He was surrounded by his love. He held it in his hand, but he could not have it. He could tap the glass, but he couldn't feel the skin. He could see the image, but he couldn't embrace it. His riches, his digital hoard of perfect images, were making him poor. He was starving, and here was a feast he could not eat. He found the live camera function again, staring at his own face, lit by the phone's own light. "You're the only one," he whispered to the image, his voice raw. The image's lips moved in perfect, silent synchronicity. "Why can't I reach you?" He didn't move. He just lay there, unblinking, staring into the electronic pool, a prisoner of the glass. It had been 5 days since Ryder Vance had seen the sun. His room, once a testament to minimalist control, was now a cave. The heavy, automated blackout curtains were drawn, and the door was locked. Outside it, a small, tragic pile of plates had grown. Linda Vance had sent up his favorites: seared ahi tuna, kale smoothies, artisanal protein bars. They all sat there, untouched, congealing in the hallway of the silent glass house. Inside, the air was stale and close. The only light came from the screen of his phone, which he kept perpetually plugged into its charger, the glowing white cable a lifeline. Ryder himself was a ruin. The golden boy was gone. His skin, deprived of sun and nutrition, was a pale, sickly gray. His eyes, in the constant blue light of the screen, were bloodshot and raw, surrounded by dark, bruised circles. A 5-day stubble, patchy and unflattering, had emerged on his perfect jaw. He hadn't showered. He hadn't changed. He was the very picture of the mess he had always despised. But he didn't see that. He was no longer just looking at his image, he was in a relationship with it. A frantic, one-sided, and increasingly angry relationship. He was whispering to the screen, his voice a dry rasp. "Why won't you answer me? I know you're in there. I can see you." He would tap the glass, his finger landing on the lips of the man in the front-facing camera. "Talk to me, please. Don't you see I've given up everything for you? I've sent them all away. It's just us now. Why isn't that enough?" The image, of course, remained silent. Perfect, beautiful, and silent. This silence was a new kind of cruelty, a new rejection. It was maddening. He would switch from pleading to anger, scrolling through the thousands of selfies he had taken. "You're toying with me. You're just like them, aren't you? Teasing me. Hiding from me behind that glass. Come out." Outside the door, Linda Vance was beyond frantic. Her son, her perfect creation, was self-destructing. His public image was one thing, but this was a sickness. She had finally, in a fit of terror, called the one man she had dismissed years ago. She stood outside the door, her hands trembling. Beside her was Dr. Terrence, the family psychiatrist. He was an older man, his face calm and serious. "I have the master key, doctor," Linda whispered, her voice cracking. I'm frightened of what we'll see." "He's a prisoner, Linda," Dr. Terrence said, his voice gentle. "He has confronted himself, just as I warned. And he has lost the battle. Open the door." Linda swiped the key card. The lock clicked. Dr. Terrence pushed the door open. The stench of a closed-in room and old food hit them first. Then they saw him. He was a creature, huddled on the far side of his king-sized bed, clutching his phone to his chest like a holy relic. He was gaunt, his ribs visible through his stained t-shirt. He hissed when the light from the hallway cut into his darkness. "Ryder!" Linda breathed, her hand flying to her mouth. "My baby, what's happened to you?" "Get out," he snarled, his voice a low growl. He scrambled to the head of the bed, shielding his phone. "Get out! You can't have him. He's mine." "Ryder," Dr. Terrence said, his voice calm. "No one is going to take anything. We're worried. You haven't eaten. You're not well." "I'm fine," Ryder shouted. He's the one who's not. He's trapped. And you're scaring him." He looked down at the screen, his voice softening to a desperate plea. "Don't listen to them. They're flawed. They're ugly. I'll protect you." Dr. Terrence looked at Linda. His face was grim. He's in a state of acute psychosis. A complete narcissistic feedback loop. He has dissociated from his physical self, which he's allowing to decay, and transferred his entire identity to the perfect image. He's starving his body to feed his obsession. "Fix him," Linda wept. "Just fix him. Get out." Ryder shrieked, and he grabbed a heavy glass water bottle from his nightstand and threw it. It shattered against the doorframe, inches from Linda's head. She screamed. Dr. Terrence pulled her back, closing the door. They heard the sound of Ryder dragging his heavy desk to barricade it. The lock clicked again. "He's lost Linda," Dr. Terrence said quietly in the hallway, as she sobbed against the wall. His image was his fortress, and now it's his prison. The prophecy, it's come true. He can't be saved by anyone but the beloved in that screen. And that beloved is just him. In the pitch-black cold of the lookout tower, Echo was also wasting. She had not left the cabin since the day she had been rejected. She was obeying his command, "Stay away from me." She had barricaded herself in, just as he had. But her starvation was not a side effect of obsession, it was a decision. She was erasing the disgusting physical self he had scorned. She was surviving on cold canned beans and sips of water, her body growing weaker, her mind lightheaded. But the isolation was not total. Her one link to the world remained, her phone, connected to a weak, solar-powered satellite link. She had told herself not to look. She had promised to forget him. But she could not. She wasn't on Instagram. That was a world of images. She was on the dark, text-only gossip forums and community boards of Cascade Ridge. Anonymous. Unseen. She found the thread. What's wrong with Ryder Vance? Her fingers trembled as she scrolled, the phone's light, even on its dimmest setting, searing her eyes. She read the posts. "A-Team Mom, my housekeeper is friends with the Vance's housekeeper. Says he's gone full-blown Howard Hughes. Hasn't left his room in a week. Just talking to himself." Ridge Runner 22 heard from the crew team. "He's been kicked off. No call, no show. Coach is furious. Watcher 8. My mom knows Dr. Terrence. He was called for an emergency at the Vance house. Said it was a total psychiatric event. Each post was a nail in her own coffin. He was suffering. The man who had destroyed her was, in turn, destroying himself. And it brought her no joy. It was a deep, resonant ache. Her love for him, as irrational and selfless as it was, remained. His pain was her pain. She read a new post, this one from a user she recognized as a nurse at the local clinic. It's a complete breakdown. They're talking about involuntary committal. He's starving himself. He's just wasting away. Echo sat back in the total darkness, the phone screen going dark. She let the words hang in the air. Her own body was weak. Her own mind was foggy. But her heart, her broken, useless heart, ached for his. A single, dry sob escaped her. Her voice, unused for days, was a cracked whisper. She repeated the words from the forum, a final, tragic reflection of his fate. Wasting away. It was the 8th day. Ryder was delirious. His body, starved and severely dehydrated, was beginning to shut down. But his mind was still locked on the light, on the beloved in his hand. He was lying on his side, his phone propped on his pillow, whispering to it. His voice was a dry, cracking rasp. Please, just one word. I've given you everything. Just speak to me. The image in the front-facing camera stared back, gaunt and pale, but still, in his eyes, perfect. And then, the beloved betrayed him. A red icon flashed in the corner of the screen, 1% battery. Panic, cold and absolute, cut through his delirium. No, he whimpered. No, no, no. He scrambled, his weak limbs trembling, to check the charger. The cable was plugged in, but the connection at the phone's port was loose, damaged from his frantic movements. It wasn't charging. No, please, don't leave me, he cried, fumbling with the cable. Don't go. He watched, in horror, as the screen flickered. It went black. The beloved was gone. A scream, high-pitched and animalistic, tore from his throat. Come back. He threw the dead, useless phone across the room, where it hit the wall and clattered to the floor. He was alone. In the dark. For the first time, his obsession had no object. He was left with only himself. Frantic, he crawled off the bed, his body screaming in protest. He needed him. He needed to see him. He stumbled, falling, and began to crawl, dragging himself out of the bedroom and into the attached marble bathroom. He pulled himself up the vanity. He stared at the mirror. It was fogged from the humidity of the sealed-off room and streaked with dust. He wiped it with his forearm, his hand shaking. And he saw. But it was not the beloved. The face in the mirror was a monster. It was a hollow-eyed skeletal creature with lank, greasy hair plastered to its skull. Its skin was the color of old parchment, its lips cracked and bleeding. Its eyes were wild, terrified. He stared, confused. Who is that? He whispered. He raised his hand to his cheek. The creature in the glass raised its hand, too. He touched his own face, feeling the sharp, unfamiliar bone of his cheek. The creature touched its face. The realization struck him. It was a physical blow, a bolt of lightning that seared through his psychosis. The beautiful one in the phone. The beloved he had sacrificed everything for. And this disgusting, ugly, dying thing in the mirror. They were the same. It was me, he whispered, his voice breaking. It was always me. He saw it all. The perfection he loved was just a reflection of the thing he was allowing to die. He was the lover, and he was the beloved. He had kindled the flames, and he was burning in them. I loved myself, he choked, the words a confession, a curse. And I'm the one I can't have. I killed him. He didn't know which him he meant anymore, the beautiful image he had starved, or the physical body he had neglected. They were one and the same, and he had destroyed them both. He collapsed, his body too weak to hold the weight of his own revelation. He lay on the cold marble floor, weeping, a broken, incoherent sound. That was when the door to his bedroom finally gave way. It wasn't a key this time. It was a ram. The heavy desk he had dragged was shoved aside, and the door burst open. Dr. Terrence entered first, followed by 2 private EMTs in white, and finally, his mother. They found him on the bathroom floor, a skeletal wreck, curled in the fetal position, sobbing. He was too weak to fight, too broken to resist. Ryder, Linda wept, falling to her knees, afraid to touch him. We have him, Dr. Terrence said, his voice firm, directing the EMTs. It's over. They moved with quiet efficiency, lifting his feather-light body onto a stretcher. He was delirious, his eyes unfocused. As they carried him out, he saw his bedroom, his perfect, sterile life, now a pit of squalor. His gaze fell on a single object on his nightstand, a small, silver-framed photograph from before. A picture of him, winning a crew race, his face the picture of golden, smiling perfection. He reached a trembling hand toward it. "Farewell," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Beautiful boy, beloved in vain." He lost consciousness. In the blackness of her tower, Echo was scrolling. Her phone was at 3% battery. She was reading the live, frantic posts from the gossip forum. "AT Mom, they're breaking the door down. I can hear Linda screaming. My God. Watcher 8, a private ambulance is there. It's not the city one. No sirens. AT Mom, they're bringing him out. They're taking him. He's on a stretcher. Ridge Runner 22, Jesus. He looks gone. He's not even fighting. He's so thin. AT Mom, my source, the housekeeper," she heard him say something. He was looking at a picture of himself. He said, "Farewell, beautiful boy." Echo's phone slipped from her fingers. The screen went dark. She was alone in the silence. The man who had destroyed her was gone. The boy she had fallen in love with was gone. His final words, relayed through a digital chain of gossip, hung in the air. Tears, hot and silent, streamed down her face. Her heart, which she thought had died, broke all over again. She felt his defeat as her own. Her lips parted, and a dry, rasping sound emerged, repeating his final tragic lament for himself. "Beautiful boy. Farewell." The ambulance pulled away, its lights flashing, but its sirens silent, disappearing down the long private driveway. Linda Vance was left standing in the wreckage of her son's room. It was a biohazard. A tomb. She was in a state of profound, numbing shock. She saw his phone, lying on the floor by the wall. The object that had stolen her son. She picked it up, her hand shaking. The screen was black. Dead. She clutched it to her chest, the last piece of him. Her thumb, by force of habit, pressed the power button on the side. For one single, fleeting second, the screen flickered to life, showing the lock screen wallpaper he had set before the battery died. It was a selfie. The last one he had taken while he was still perfect. His face, angled, lit by the window, his gray-blue eyes staring directly into the lens. He was smiling, a cool, confident, and impossibly beautiful smile. The screen went black again, for good this time. The man was gone, committed to an institution, his mind shattered. But the Narcissus, the perfect, cold, and beautiful image, remained, trapped forever on a dead piece of glass. When Echo's phone screen went dark, it was as if the last star in her universe had been extinguished. The gossip, the news, the frantic digital footprint of Ryder Vance, it was all gone. Her final link to the world, her last method of watching him, was severed. The blackness in the lookout tower was no longer just a choice, it was absolute. She was truly, finally, alone. His final whispered words, filtered through the static of the internet, were all she had left. "Beautiful boy. Farewell." She repeated them, her voice a dry rasp, until the words lost their meaning and became just sound. Her body, already weakened by days of self-neglect, began to fail. The hunger was no longer a sharp, demanding pain. It was a dull, cold, and hollow void. She was too weak to stand, too weak to even crawl to her dwindling supply of water. She lay on her cot, wrapped in her one-wool blanket, and let the cold of the coming winter seep in. She had obeyed his command. She had stayed away. She had made herself not disgusting by making herself not. Evelyn Reed, the woman, the podcaster, the person, was fading. That night, the first great winter storm of the season blew in from the Pacific. It slammed into the Cascade Mountains with a primal fury. The wind shrieked, a high-pitched, mournful sound that rattled the old lookout tower on its stilts. Rain and sleet lashed against the windows, a percussive, angry drumming. Echo, in her delirium, no longer heard the storm as weather. She heard it as a voice. The howl of the wind in the cedars. Away ye! The sharp crack of a branch breaking under the ice. Break! The endless, rushing hush of the rain. Hush! She was no longer repeating human words. She was reflecting the world. She had become so empty that she was now just a vessel for the sounds of the wilderness. Her mind, foggy and dim, let go. Her last coherent thought was not of herself, but of him. Beautiful boy. Her breathing grew shallow. The storm raged for 2 days. And then, there was silence. Spring came to the Kallos wilderness. The snow melted, and the trails reappeared. Two hikers, heading far off trail, eventually found the abandoned lookout tower. The door was barred from the inside. When they forced it open, they found the cabin empty. There was a cot with a neatly folded blanket, a cold wood stove with a cracked compact mirror inside, an empty, open can of beans, a dead phone. But there was no body. There was no note. There was no sign of struggle. Evelyn Reed, the woman who had fled the world, had simply vanished. The curse of Jenna Marshall had, in a way, been fulfilled. The powerful media mogul, whose husband was eventually indicted on 3 counts of fraud, had succeeded in silencing Evelyn Reed. But in doing so, she had created a new, and far more permanent, myth. And Ryder Vance, the golden boy of Cascade Ridge, was never seen again. He existed, according to official records, in a private, long-term psychiatric facility in the sterile quiet of eastern Washington. He was unresponsive, kept alive by tubes, his mind permanently shattered. The glass and steel house was sold. His mother, Linda, moved to Arizona, where no one knew her name. The Narcissus, the perfect, vibrant boy, was gone. Only his image remained, in old yearbooks and the cached memory of his dead phone. The story should have ended there. But it didn't. A year later, 2 new hikers, a young couple named Mike and Sarah, were exploring the Kallos wilderness. They were trying to find the ravine where the Ryder Vance story had supposedly reached its climax. "This is it, I think," Mike said, checking his phone's GPS. "This is where they say he had his breakdown." Sarah shivered, pulling her jacket tighter. The air was damp and heavy. "God, it's creepy here. It feels, I don't know, like we're being watched." "It's the other story too," Mike said, lowering his voice. "The Kallos Echo. They say a woman vanished out here around the same time. A hermit. They say if you call out, she repeats you." Sarah laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "That's ridiculous, Mike. That's a campfire story. It's just, you know, the way the sound bounces off the ravine. An echo." Mike grinned. He was all bravado. He cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted, his voice booming into the misty gorge. "Is anyone here?" They waited. There was a long, heavy silence. The only sound was the rush of the creek, far below. Mike scoffed. "See? Nothing. Just a dumb story. Come on, let's go." He turned and took a step. Sarah was right behind him. And then, it came. It was not a booming echo from the rocks. It was a whisper. A clear, feminine whisper that seemed to come not from the ravine, but from the ferns at their feet, from the trees around them, from the air itself. "Here." Mike and Sarah froze. The blood drained from their faces. "What was that?" Sarah whispered. I don't know," Mike whispered back. "She had obeyed. She had stayed away." Evelyn Reed, the body, was gone. But Echo, the voice, the reflection, the sound without a source, she remained, trapped forever in the cold, green hills. The story should have been over. Ryder Vance was a name spoken in hushed tones, a ghost haunting the glass and steel hallways of Cascade Ridge High. Evelyn Reed was a missing persons report, a cautionary tale for hikers. The myth had been written, the players removed from the board. But for the living, the story was not over. For Amber Harrison, it was just beginning. Cascade Ridge had processed the tragedy in the only way it knew how, by turning it into high-end gossip. 2 months after Ryder had been taken, Amber sat in the Ridge Grind coffee shop, pretending to study. She listened to the whispers from the table next to her. "I heard he's completely catatonic," one woman said, stirring her macchiato. "Just stares. They have to feed him with a tube." "His poor mother," another replied. "Linda has lost everything. She put the house on the market. They say it's a quiet sale, but everyone knows. It's tainted. And the girl," the first woman added, her voice dropping. "The one in the woods. The Kallos Echo. They say she was obsessed with him. They say she starved herself to death for him." Amber's stomach turned. She closed her laptop, the bile rising in her throat. She fled the coffee shop, her heart hammering. She drove home, locked her bedroom door, and opened her laptop again. She navigated to her Finsta account. She scrolled back, until she found it. The post. Her curse. "I wish he could fall for someone who will never love him back. Let him see what it's like. Let him fall in love with something as cold and empty and perfect as he thinks he is." She stared at the words until her eyes burned. It was a digital murder weapon. She had typed a few bitter sentences, and a boy had lost his mind. A woman had vanished. She was Nemesis. She was the goddess of revenge, and her aim had been terrifyingly true. The guilt was a physical weight. It was her own wasting disease. She stopped sleeping. She, the girl who was supposed to be valedictorian, was failing classes. She became obsessed. She was haunted by Ryder. But not the Ryder she had known, the arrogant, cruel boy in the hallway. She was haunted by the image of him. She would see his perfect, smiling crew photo in the school's digital trophy case, and she would feel a jolt of terror. She would look at her own reflection in her dark phone screen and, for a split second, she would see his face staring back. But it was the other victim that truly unraveled her. The Kallos Echo. Amber was a researcher. She needed to know. She began digging. She went beyond the gossip forums. She found the archives of the Reed Report. She listened, 4 hours, to Evelyn Reed's voice, the strong, confident, intelligent alto that had been silenced. She read the old articles about Evelyn's downfall, the accusations of fraud, the name Jenna Marshall. She pieced it together. The girl in the woods wasn't some random, obsessed hiker. She was a victim, just like Ryder, but of a different curse. Amber realized she wasn't the only nemesis in this story. Jenna Marshall had been one, too. They had both, in their own ways, demanded justice, and in doing so, had unleashed a tragedy that had consumed everyone. She couldn't carry the weight of it. She needed a confessor, a priest. She needed the only person who had seen any of this coming. She made an appointment with Dr. Terrence. She sat in his quiet, leather and mahogany office, the same office where Ryder's prophecy had been given. I'm not a patient, she stammered, her hands shaking. I'm here about Ryder Vance. Dr. Terrence just looked at her, his eyes kind but deeply sad.
I see.
And what about him, Amber? I think I did it, she whispered.
I think
I'm responsible for what happened to him. She pulled out her phone and showed him the Finsta post. I wished for it. I was so angry, and I wrote this. And it happened. Exactly like I wrote it. I made him fall in love with himself. I killed him. Dr. Terrence read the post. He was silent for a full minute. He took off his glasses and cleaned them. Amber, he said, his voice gentle. You don't have that kind of power. You are not a witch. You didn't cast a spell. But, she said, tears welling. It happened. You didn't cause his fall, Dr. Terrence continued, leaning forward. You just named it. You saw what was already there. Ryder was a glass, filled to the brim, standing on the very edge of a table. He had been there his entire life, placed there by his mother, by his privilege, by society that worships only the surface. He was always going to fall. All you did was be the first person to say, that glass is going to break. He explained his original warning to Linda. I told her he would be fine, so long as he never truly knew himself. But he was so insulated, so perfect, he eventually rejected all external mirrors. The only one left was himself. The girl in the woods, she was a mirror he found disgusting. So he turned to the final, perfect one, his phone. So I didn't do it, Amber asked, her voice small.
No.
You just witnessed it. You gave a name to the reckoning, child. And that is the true burden of Nemesis. Not to cause the fall, but to demand it. And then to be forced to watch. Amber sat back, the guilt not gone, but changed. It was no longer the sharp guilt of a murderer, but the heavy chronic ache of a survivor. What about the girl? She asked. Evelyn Reed. Dr. Terrence sighed. She was the other half of the tragedy. Two people, Amber, both destroyed by images. He by the love of his own, and she by the cruelty of his. He was a black hole that pulled her in, and they both collapsed. Amber left his office an hour later. The world outside seemed different, sharper. She wasn't a monster. She was just the one who had to remember. She sat in her car, the silence heavy. She took out her phone, opened her Finsta, and looked at the post one last time. Then, she deleted it. The digital curse was gone. She drove home. She opened her laptop. She stared at the blank screen for a long time. Then, she opened a new document. She had been the witness. She had been the nemesis. And now, she would be the storyteller. She typed a title. A Tale of Cascade Ridge. Then she began. Chapter 1: The Golden Boy of Cascade Ridge. In the cold modern mythology of Cascade Ridge, Linda Vance was cast in the role of the grieving mother. She played the part perfectly. She wore tasteful, expensive black. She accepted condolences with a stiff, martyred grace. She quietly put the great glass and steel house on the market, citing too many memories. But Linda was not just a grieving mother. She was a failed artist. Ryder had been her masterpiece, her life's work of curation. And he had, in the most public and messy way possible, ruined himself. This chapter of our story finds her 3 months after Ryder's committal, on the last day in the house. It had been sold to a software executive from California who appreciated its clean lines and lack of sentimentality. The stagers had already removed all the furniture. The house was an empty, echoing shell. Linda walked through the sterile white rooms, her heels clicking on the polished concrete floors. Every sound was magnified. Every glass wall, no longer holding a view of a curated garden, simply reflected her, a solitary, aging woman in an empty box. Her grief was not the soft, aching sadness of a typical mother. It was a cold, hard, diamond-like rage. She was furious. She was furious at Ryder, for his weakness, for his indulgence. How could he, after all she had done for him, all the work she had put in, allow himself to become that thing she had seen on the gurney? Gaunt, filthy, incoherent. It was a betrayal of her brand, of her entire life. She was furious at Dr. Terrence for his smug, "I told you so" silence. She was furious at the town, for their whispers, for the pity in their eyes, which felt like acid. She had lost her son. But more importantly, she had lost her image. She left the house without a backward glance. She flew to Scottsdale, Arizona, to a new, sterile, white condominium in a gated community where the sun was always shining and no one knew her name. She unpacked her few, carefully selected boxes. And then, she sat down with the one singular object she had salvaged from the wreckage of her son's room. His phone. It was the black, polished rectangle that had stolen him. She had kept it, a relic of the sickness. For weeks, she had been too afraid to look. She had told herself she was respecting his privacy. The truth was, she was terrified of what she might find. Evidence of drugs? Secret, sordid messages? She had paid a private digital forensics company in Phoenix $1,000 to unlock it and replace the battery. It now sat on her new, white quartz countertop, fully charged. She poured a glass of chilled, expensive Chardonnay. She sat on her new, white leather sofa. She picked up the phone. She pressed the power button. The screen lit up. The lock screen. It was the photo. The last, perfect, selfie. The smiling, beautiful boy. Her heart ached. This was her son. This was the boy she had lost. She swiped up. It was unlocked. She opened his text messages. Nothing. He hadn't sent or received a text in the last 2 weeks of his life. She opened his social media. Dark. She opened his browser. Empty. Her confusion grew. Where was the sickness? And then, she saw it. The one app with a red, 4317 notification badge. The photo gallery. Her thumb trembled. She touched the icon. The gallery opened. At first, it was the Ryder she knew. Perfect. Curated. Photos from the crew boat. Photos from a family ski trip to Whistler. A few, perfect, artfully casual shots of him reading. But then, she scrolled past the day of the run. And the curation stopped. The photos from his room began. At first, they were just him. Dozens, then hundreds, of selfies. His face, his eyes, his hair. He was so vain, she murmured, a note of relieved, familiar annoyance in her voice. But she kept scrolling. The dates changed. The days wore on. And the images began to change. The photos became more frantic. The lighting grew darker. The cool, confident smile was replaced by a strange, intense, questioning stare. He was no longer posing. He was searching. She scrolled deeper, into the last 3 days. And she gasped. The face staring back at her was not her son. It was the creature from the gurney. Gaunt. Hollow-eyed. The stubble was there. The lank, greasy hair. The eyes were no longer confident. They were wide, desperate, adoring, and terrified. He was taking pictures of his own decay. They were not selfies. They were confessions. They were the frantic, obsessive documentation of a man locked in a room, in love with his own disappearing image. Photo 4300, his face, half in shadow, his lips cracked. Photo 4310, just his eye, red-rimmed and raw. Photo 4317, the last photo. A blurry, desperate shot, his face contorted in what looked like a sob. Linda threw the phone. It hit the new, white sofa, bouncing harmlessly. She was hyperventilating. This was the truth. This was the beloved he had chosen over her. This filth. This weakness. She saw Dr. Terrence's words in her mind. So long as he never truly knows himself. He had known himself. He had seen all of this. The perfect and the grotesque. And it had shattered him. Linda Vance began to weep. But not for the lost boy. She wept for the ugliness of the truth. She wept because the evidence of her failure was right there, in high definition. She sat there for a long time. The Chardonnay grew warm. Finally, her breathing slowed. Her curation, her instinct, returned. She was a cleaner. She had to clean up this mess. She picked up the phone. Her hand was steady now. She opened the gallery. She scrolled to the last, blurry, sobbing photo. She tapped, select. She began to swipe backwards. She selected the weeping photo. The raw eye, the gaunt face, the desperate stare. She selected all of them. 4,317 photos. Her thumb hovered over the trash can icon. She hesitated. This was the last real part of him left. But it was not her Ryder. She tapped the icon. Delete 4,317 items? She pressed delete. She watched as the evidence of his descent, the truth of his sickness, was erased. The camera roll was now empty. No, not quite empty. She scrolled all the way to the top, to the photos from before the run. She found the one, the perfect one, the one he had used as his lock screen. His face, smiling, angelic, the misty Kallos woods behind him. She selected all the other approved photos, the ski trips, the crew boat, and deleted those, too. They were irrelevant. Now, the gallery was truly clean. It contained a single image. She looked at it. This was her son. This was the flower left behind. The boy who had been too perfect for this world. This was the Narcissus she would mourn. She set that single, perfect photo as her phone's wallpaper. She placed the phone on her nightstand. Linda Vance, in her sterile white home, had learned nothing. She had completed the myth. She had erased the man and curated the image. And in the bright Arizona sun, she sat alone, staring at the glowing screen, a prisoner of the same perfect, beautiful face that had claimed her son. While Linda Vance was in Arizona, curating a dead image, and the legend of the Kallos Echo was taking root in the damp earth of the preserve, the agent of the original tragedy remained. Jenna Marshall, the Hera of this story, was still on her throne. From her corner office on the 50th floor of the Atlas Media Tower, she looked down on Seattle. Her world was not perfect, but it was hers. Her husband, Peter, the Zeus figure, was a problem. His indictment for international fraud was a messy, expensive headache. But Jenna was a fixer. She was a goddess of the modern world, and she controlled the narrative. She had silenced one podcaster. She could handle the federal government. She believed Evelyn Reed was a problem she had solved, a ghost buried in a cold case and a missing persons report. She had not, however, accounted for Amber Harrison. Amber, in her new role as the historian of the Cascade Ridge tragedy, had not stopped at Ryder. Her story had become an investigation. She had become obsessed with the other victim, the one whose name was only whispered, Evelyn Reed. Amber was smart, and she was relentless. She was Nemesis. She dug, and she found the digital archives of the Reed report. She found the locked, encrypted files of Evelyn's last investigation. She found the web of shell corporations, the shipping manifests, the offshore accounts, all leading back to Peter Marshall. And she found the evidence of the smear campaign that had destroyed Evelyn's life, the fabricated emails, the payments to false witnesses, all originating from an IP address traced back to the Atlas Media Tower. Amber now had the whole story. She wrote a new post on her blog. It was not a chapter. It was an indictment. She titled it, "The Echo in the Woods was a woman named Evelyn Reed. And this is who silenced her." She published the post, complete with the shipping manifests and the IP logs. Jenna Marshall was in a board meeting, discussing falling ad revenue, when her chief legal counsel interrupted. He slid a tablet in front of her. "Ma'am, you need to see this." Jenna read the post. Her blood, usually so cool and controlled, turned to ice, then to fire. A child. A high school blogger from Cascade Ridge was trying to undo her. "Bury her," Jenna said, her voice a low, dangerous hiss. "I don't care what it costs. Send the cease and desist. Call her parents. Call her principal. Threaten to sue the school, the district. Tell them we will tie this girl up in litigation until she's 50. I want her ruined. I want her blog, her future, her name, erased." Her legal team, a pack of wolves in $1,000 suits, attacked. Within an hour, Amber Harrison's parents received a call. "Your daughter is being sued for $50 million. Within 2, the principal of Cascade Ridge High received a call. "If you don't expel Amber Harrison for this libelous attack, Atlas Media will pull all funding from the school district, and we will add the school to the lawsuit." It was the same tactic she had used on Evelyn. Total annihilation. But Jenna Marshall, the goddess, had miscalculated. This was not 2 years ago. The world was different. And Amber was not Evelyn. Evelyn had been an individual, alone. Amber was a story, one the town was already obsessed with. Jenna's legal threats were not a scalpel, they were a bomb. And the explosion caught the attention of everyone. A reporter at the Seattle Times, a bitter rival of Atlas Media, got the tip. The next morning's headline, in print and online, was explosive. "Media mogul Jenna Marshall threatens high school valedictorian." The crime. Publishing the lost research of podcaster Evelyn Reed, who vanished after investigating Marshall's husband. Jenna had invoked the great, unspoken law of the modern internet, the Streisand effect. In her attempt to silence Amber's post, she had made it the single most read article in the country. Within 24 hours, Evelyn Reed was trending nationally. Amber's blog, A Tale of Cascade Ridge, had crashed from the traffic. But it was too late. The post had been screenshotted, copied, and rehosted by everyone. Major news networks, sensing blood in the water, began downloading the old archives of the Reed Report. They began airing segments, listening to Evelyn's voice, validating her research. The voice that Jenna had cursed, to only repeat others, was now being repeated by all others. Evelyn Reed's work, her name, and her truth were being echoed 1,000,000 times over, in a deafening roar that shook the foundations of the Atlas Media Tower. The climax came a week later. Jenna Marshall was in her office, watching her own flagship news network. The federal case against her husband, which had been stalling, had just been blown wide open by the new evidence Amber had published. Peter Marshall was finished. But the story didn't end there. The anchor, her anchor, looked gravely into the camera. And in a developing story, the anchor read, his voice tense, "The Justice Department is now opening a new investigation into Atlas Media and CEO Jenna Marshall herself for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and fabrication of evidence in the original Evelyn Reed case." Jenna stood up. She walked to the great glass window, looking down on the city that had been hers. Her lawyers were calling. The board was calling. She didn't answer. She was ruined. The goddess was mortal, and she was falling. She had cursed a woman for having a voice. And in the end, it was that woman's voice, amplified into a global echo, that had become her executioner. In the sterile silence of her office, the only sound she could hear was the idea of a sound, a faint, clear, impossible whisper that seemed to come from the air conditioning vents. "Here." Silenced her. Reckoning. The ghost in the woods had finally, truly, come home. 1 year. In the curated, fast-paced world of Cascade Ridge, a year is a lifetime. The glass and steel house where Ryder Vance had lived was sold, sterilized, and occupied by a new tech executive who had no idea of the tragedy that had occurred in its master bathroom. Linda Vance was a forgotten name in Arizona. Jenna Marshall was a disgraced footnote, awaiting trial, her media empire carved up and sold for parts. Amber Harrison was a freshman at Yale, her tell-all blog a viral sensation that had defined her, for better or worse. The people were gone. The tragedy was over. But the myth was just getting started. The Kallos Wilderness Preserve was no longer just a place for trail running. It had become a destination for a different kind of tourism. It was now the epicenter of the town's shadow self. The story of the Golden Boy and the Kallos Echo had become the official ghost story of Cascade Ridge. It was a cold, foggy Friday night in October, a year after the first hikers had heard her voice. 3 teenagers, Josh, Chloe, and Ben, were standing at the Kallos trailhead. They were 16. They were bored, privileged, and desperate for a thrill. They were legend-tripping. "I can't believe we're doing this," Chloe whispered, pulling her expensive North Face jacket tighter. The fog was so thick it seemed to swallow the beam of her flashlight. "Relax, Chloe," Josh said, affecting a bravery he didn't feel. "It's just a story. There's no Kallos Echo. That's not what my sister said, Ben added, his voice hushed. She said Mike and Sarah, from the senior class last year, they heard it. They came running out of here, man. Crying. They started walking, their footsteps too loud on the gravel path. The deeper they went, the quieter they became. The forest, which was merely nature in the daytime, was a different entity at night. The fog deadened all sound, creating a feeling of profound, claustrophobic isolation. They were arguing, in hushed tones, about the lore. They were piecing together the tragedy from the fragments left behind, Amber's blog, the old news reports, and the wild, unverified gossip. My dad said Ryder Vance just went crazy, Josh offered. He said he was so narcissistic, he literally just stared at his phone until his brain broke. That's not the whole story, Chloe countered. She was the one who had actually read Amber's blog. There was a woman, Evelyn Reed. He was cruel to her, in these very woods. And she just gave up. They never found her body. That's who the Echo is. Dude, Ben said, stopping. You're both wrong. My uncle works in the city. He said the woman, Evelyn, was an investigative reporter, and she was murdered by Jenna Marshall. They say she's buried out here. And the only reason Ryder Vance went crazy is because he saw it. He saw the body, and it broke his mind. And that's why the Echo repeats you. She's trying to tell you who killed her. This new, grisly version of the story hung in the air, terrifying and plausible. They had reached the ravine. It was a black, gaping wound in the earth, the mist so thick they couldn't see the bottom. The only sound was the faint, distant rush of the creek below. It was here, according to the legend, that Ryder had rejected her. It was here that the hikers had heard her. This is it, Josh said, his voice cracking. This is the spot. Chloe grabbed his arm. Let's go back. I hate this. No, we came all this way, Ben insisted, his eyes wide in the flashlight beam. We have to try. We have to call her. You do it, Josh said. No, you do it. You're the one who said it was fake. Josh swallowed. He stepped closer to the edge. He took a deep breath, trying to sound brave. Hey, Ryder Vance. We know you're here. His voice was swallowed by the fog. There was no reply. See, Josh said, his voice full of false relief. Nothing. You have to use her name, Chloe whispered, her eyes darting into the darkness. The legend says you have to ask for her. Josh looked at Ben. Ben nodded. Okay, Josh said. He was quieter this time, his bravado gone. He was no longer a cynic. He was a participant. Evelyn, he called out, his voice small. Evelyn Reed. Are you here? A deep, heavy silence fell over the ravine. They stood frozen for 10, 20, 30 seconds. Nothing. Just the wind, moving through the high, unseen branches of the firs. Josh let out a shaky laugh. Okay, I'm done. This is stupid. Let's go. He turned to leave. Chloe and Ben turned with him. And from the darkness, directly behind them, a whisper. It was not an echo. It was a clear, feminine, and impossibly sad voice that seemed to come from the air itself. Here. The three of them froze. Their blood turned to ice. What was that? Chloe whispered, so quietly it was barely a breath. The whisper came again, a perfect, cold mimicry of her own terror. What was that? Ben screamed. It was a high-pitched, genuine shriek of pure panic. He turned and ran, scrambling, falling on the slick trail. Josh grabbed Chloe's hand and they ran after him, their flashlights bouncing, illuminating chaotic, lurching images of ferns and tree trunks. They didn't look back. They ran, fueled by an adrenaline-laced terror, their hearts trying to beat their way out of their chests. They burst out of the trailhead, tumbling onto the gravel of the parking lot, gasping for air, their knees bloody. They scrambled into Josh's car, the sound of the electric locks clicking shut the loudest, most comforting sound in the world. Josh fumbled the key, the car turning on. The headlights cut into the fog, illuminating the Kallos Wilderness Preserve sign. They were safe. Chloe, sitting in the passenger seat, was openly sobbing, her body shaking. I told you, Ben was saying, his voice a high-pitched squeak. I told you it was real. As Josh put the car in reverse, Chloe looked back at the wall of darkness that was the trailhead. She wiped her tears, her breathing starting to slow. And on the wind, so faint she almost missed it, she heard one last whisper. It wasn't a mimicry. It wasn't an echo. It was a statement. A single, mournful word, reflecting their own terror. Afraid. The legend was no longer a story. It was an active, listening entity. The myth was real. The tires of Josh's car screamed on the asphalt as he peeled out of the Kallos Wilderness parking lot. No one spoke. The only sound in the car was Chloe's ragged, hysterical sobbing. Ben was rigid in the back seat, staring out the rear window as if expecting to see a figure running after them. Josh drove, his hands in a white-knuckled grip, until the dark, misty woods were replaced by the bright, sterile, and safe glow of Cascade Ridge's 24-hour Ridge Diner. He pulled into a parking spot under a buzzing neon light and killed the engine. They sat in the silence for a full minute, the car ticking as it cooled. "It was a speaker," Josh said finally, his voice sounding thin and unconvincing. It had to be. Someone was up there, pranking us." "A prank," Chloe said, her voice a wet, furious whisper. "Did you hear it, Josh? It mimicked me. It knew I was scared. It said, afraid. It said, what was that?" Josh countered, trying to rationalize. "No," Ben said, his voice a low, trembling monotone. "He hadn't moved. Chloe's right. I heard it too. The very last word, on the wind. Afraid. It wasn't a mimic. It was a comment." That new, terrible thought hung in the air. The echo wasn't just a recording. It was listening. It was aware. "It was her," Ben continued, his eyes wide with a convert's frantic zeal. "It was Evelyn Reed. She's stuck there. We talked to her." "We're not talking to anyone," Josh said, his fear finally giving way to anger. "We're not saying a word about this. People will think we're insane." "I don't care," Ben said. He pulled out his phone, his thumbs moving, fast and clumsy. "People have to know. They have to be warned. It's not a legend. It's real." "Ben, don't," Chloe yelled, lunging for the phone. But it was too late. He hit post. A frantic, all-caps, typo-filled post on his private Instagram story, which he knew would be screenshotted and spread within 10 minutes. "Kallos is not a joke. The echo is real. We heard her. She is real, she is listening, do not go there, I swear to God." The next morning, the digital explosion was immediate. The social ecosystem of Cascade Ridge High, which had been starved of a real scandal since the Jenna Marshall/Amber Harrison story, lit up. By the time Chloe came downstairs for breakfast, her phone was a vibrating brick of notifications. Her parents were waiting at the kitchen island, their faces grim. "You're grounded," her father said, not even looking up from his coffee. "For a month." "What? Why?" "You know why," her mother snapped. "This ghost nonsense. You, Ben, and Josh. Your principal has already called. You were told to stay out of those woods. And now you're disrespecting the memory of that Vance boy and the woman who went missing. It's tasteless, Chloe. And you're scaring people." It was the same at Josh's house. "You are embarrassing this family," his father told him. "It was the wind. This town has a history. You do not add to the gossip. Now you will go to school, you will tell everyone you were joking, and you will delete any mention of this." But the fire was already out of their control. Ben's post was the only thing anyone was talking about. On Monday, the three of them were called to the principal's office before first period. Mrs. Davies, the principal, looked exhausted. She was a woman who had, in the last year, dealt with the public breakdown of her star pupil, the humiliation of one of the school's chief donors, Jenna Marshall, and the investigative reporting of another student, Amber Harrison. She had no patience left for mythology. "Sit down," she said. The three of them sat, feeling like children. "I want to be very clear," Mrs. Davies said, her voice firm and devoid of sympathy. "What you did on Friday night was reckless, foolish, and dangerous. You were trespassing in a preserve that is closed after dusk. What you think you heard was an acoustic anomaly. That ravine is famous for strange wind patterns and echoes. Or it was a senior prank. What it was not is a ghost." She leaned forward. "This community has been through a lot. Those woods are the site of a very real, very painful human tragedy. Two, in fact. Your ghost story is not only false, it is profoundly disrespectful. You are stirring up pain. You are not to speak of this again. You are not to post about it. The Kallos Preserve is now officially off limits to all Cascade Ridge students, period." "Am I understood?" "But we..." Ben started. "Am I understood?" she repeated. "Yes, Mrs. Davies," Chloe whispered. They were dismissed. They walked into the main hallway, and the school fell silent. Everyone was staring. They weren't just kids anymore. They were the Kallos trio. The liars. The freaks. The ones who heard the ghost. Some kids snickered. "Oh, hear a spooky sound, Ben." But far more kids looked at them with a new, terrified, and deeply curious respect. They were the ones who had dared. The adults' denial, the official, rational explanation, had backfired. By trying to suppress the story, Mrs. Davies had confirmed to the entire student body that something was out there. Something the adults were afraid of. That night, Chloe was in her room, grounded, staring at her laptop. She was scrolling through the hundreds of comments on the screenshots of Ben's post. "Liar. Attention seeker. Freak. I believe you." What did she sound like? My cousin heard her too. He said she whispered his name. She was terrified. She was humiliated. And she was angry. Her phone buzzed. A group chat. Josh and Ben. Ben, they all think we're liars. My dad is threatening to take my phone. Josh, I know. My dad too. But it wasn't the wind, Chloe. I can't stop hearing it. Here. It was so clear. Ben, we have to go back. Chloe's blood ran cold. Chloe, what? No. Never. Josh, he's right, Chloe. Not like before. But they're calling us liars. Ben, we have to get proof. We need to record it. We need a real recorder. Not a phone. We need to prove it. Chloe read the text. Go back. The thought made her physically ill. The memory of the voice, the panic, the coldness of the whisper, but the memory of the principal's office, of her parents' dismissal, of the snickering in the hallway, that was a different kind of pain. The injustice of it. She looked out her window, toward the dark, unseen outline of the mountains. The echo was out there, and she had, in her own strange, tragic way, asked for their help. The attempt to silence her had failed. It had only created new apostles. The official, adult narrative had been established. The Kallos Echo was a combination of wind, teen hysteria, and a disrespectful prank. Mrs. Davies had made her announcement. The parents of Cascade Ridge had grounded their children. The subject was, as far as the real world was concerned, closed. But for Josh, Chloe, and Ben, the Kallos trio, it was the only thing that was real. They were pariahs at school, a mix of liar and legend. The ridicule was worse than the fear had been. Being disbelieved, being patronized, was an insult they couldn't ignore. Ben's declaration, "We have to go back," had, in the light of day, transformed from a terrified impulse into a concrete, necessary mission. They planned it like a heist. They met, not at school, but in the sterile high-tech garage of Josh's house, a space that looked more like an Apple store than a workshop. "We're not just going back," Josh said, pacing. He was the pragmatist, the one who needed to defeat the mystery. "We're going in prepared. Last time, we were kids on a dare. This time, it's an investigation." He gestured to the gear laid out on his father's workbench. "It's not a ghost, it's a signal. Or it's a person. If it's a person, they're trespassing and setting up speakers. My new drone has a thermal imaging camera. If there's a human being within a mile of that ravine, I will see their body heat." Ben had his own contribution. He'd used his allowance to buy a Tascam DR40, a professional-grade digital audio recorder with high-sensitivity condenser mics. "This is what the ghost hunters guys use," he said, his voice reverent. "It's got 4-channel recording. It's not a crappy phone mic. If she whispers, this will capture it. We'll get an EVP, electronic voice phenomenon. We'll have proof." Chloe, who had snuck out to be there, felt sick. She was the only one who didn't see this as a technical problem. "You guys," she said, her voice small. "You're both talking about it and signals. What if it's her? What if she's, a ghost? What if she's sad? And we're just poking her?" "All the more reason to get proof," Josh said, not unkindly. "If it's real, we prove it. If it's a prank, we expose it. Either way, we win." The incursion was set for midnight on Thursday. The hike back was a different experience. The first time, they had been loud, nervous, and excited. This time, they were silent, efficient, and terrified. They parked a mile from the trailhead, hiking in from an old logging road. The woods were darker, the fog thicker, the silence more profound. It was an expectant, listening quiet. They reached the ravine. The blackness was absolute. "Okay," Josh whispered, his voice sounding small in the vast, open-air tomb. "Let's set up." Josh unpacked his drone. With a quiet whir, it lifted off, its small red and green lights disappearing into the mist. He monitored it on a tablet, the world shifting to the grainy, black and white of thermal imaging. "Drone is up," he whispered. "I'm starting my sweep. I see nothing. Just cold rocks and trees. Go ahead, Ben." Ben set up the Tascam recorder on a small tripod, the shotgun microphone aimed at the spot where the whisper had originated. He put on his headphones, his face tense. "Recorder is hot. Levels are clean. It's all yours, Chloe." "You're the one," she answered. Chloe's heart was a drum. She was the bait. She stepped to the edge of the ravine, her flashlight beam pointing down. "Evelyn," she called out, her voice a shaking, thin thing. "Evelyn Reed. It's Chloe. We're back. From the other night. We didn't mean to run. We believe you." She held her breath. Josh stared at his thermal screen. Nothing. No heat. No movement. Ben closed his eyes, listening. Nothing but wind. "Try again." Chloe took a deeper breath. We know what they did to you," she said, pulling from Amber's blog, from the legend. "We know about Jenna Marshall. We know you were silenced. We're sorry." Ben's eyes snapped open. He held up a hand. "I got something," he hissed. On the audio, a faint spike. A whisper. But it wasn't a mimic. It was softer. "Sorry." She's here," Ben whispered. "Josh, do you see anything?" "Nothing." Josh hissed back. "It's dead cold. There's nothing there. It's not a person." A new, cold dread settled over them. It was real. "Chloe, keep talking," Ben urged, his hands trembling on the recorder. She's responding." Chloe felt a strange, cold burst of confidence. "We're not here to hurt you. We just want to." Before she could finish, a new sound came through Ben's headphones. A sound so loud it made him rip them from his head. It was a hiss. A sound like 1,000 voices whispering at once. And then, the vortex of sound erupted from the ravine. It was not one voice. It was all of them. First, the sounds of the storm from the night Evelyn had vanished. The howl of the wind, the crack of the branch. Then, a man's voice, cold and sharp, echoing from the trees. "Disgusting. Stay away from me." Chloe stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth. She knew that voice from the legend. It was Ryder. Then, the final, tragic words, filling the air, coming from everywhere at once. "Beautiful boy. Farewell." The sound was a cacophony, a psychic assault of pure, unfiltered pain. It was the sound of Evelyn Reed's entire trauma, her last days, her death, and Ryder's, all compressed into one horrifying blast. The Tascam recorder's levels spiked into the red, the sound distorting into a deafening, digital screech. "What is that?" Josh yelled. "My drone just lost connection. It's going down." He looked at his tablet. The screen was just static. The drone crashed, unseen, into the trees. Chloe screamed. "Get the recorder!" Josh yelled, grabbing Chloe's arm. Ben snatched the tripod, not even bothering to shut it down. They ran. Again. But this time, it was not a panicked flight. It was a retreat. They had engaged an enemy they did not understand. They had kicked the hornet's nest. They piled into the car, Josh fumbling the keys again, the engine roaring to life. They drove in total silence, back to the Ridge Diner. They sat in the booth, the same booth as before, the smell of old coffee and bleach a comforting anchor. They were all shaking. Finally, Ben took the recorder. He put it on the table. "Well," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. We got the proof." He rewound the audio. He pressed play. First, Chloe's voice, clear as day. We believe you." A second of silence. And then, the whisper, clean, clear, and undeniable. "Believe you." Then, Chloe's voice again. We're sorry." And the whisper, "Sorry." And then, the vortex. The horrible, multi-layered screech of a dozen voices, Ryder's disgusting and beautiful boy, clearly audible under the static. They all stared at the small, black device. Josh, the pragmatist, was pale. "It wasn't a speaker," he whispered. "The thermal was clean. It wasn't human." Ben was triumphant, but terrified. "We got her. We proved it." Chloe shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. That wasn't a ghost, Ben. That was hell. We didn't just hear her. We heard her pain. The three of them sat in silence, the gravity of what they had done, what they had found, settling on them. They had their proof. The question was, now what? The trio sat in the sterile fluorescent light of the Ridge Diner, the Tascam recorder sitting on the table between them like a small, black bomb. The smell of coffee and stale grease, which had been a comfort an hour ago, was now just nauseating. They had done it. They had the proof. And it was the most terrifying thing any of them had ever possessed. We have to release this, Ben said, his voice a low, shaky whisper. He was already typing on his phone. YouTube. X. We send the .wav file to Amber Harrison's blog. We send it to the Seattle Times. We tell everyone. We were right. They were wrong. Shut up, Ben. Josh hissed, his pragmatism returning. Are you crazy? Did you hear that thing? That wasn't just Evelyn. That was him. That was Ryder Vance's voice. We can't just drop that. His mother is. She's still alive. This isn't content for your channel, man. It's violent. Josh is right, Chloe said, wrapping her arms around herself. She was shivering. We hurt her, I think. We brought it all back up. That wasn't a ghost. It was a memory. A scar. We made it bleed. We can't just exploit her pain to prove we're not liars. So what? Ben said, his frustration rising. We just sit on this? We let them all win. We let them call us crazy. We got suspended because of this. I want vindication. We will, Josh said, his mind working. But we do it the right way. Not like a couple of kids. We show the adults. We show our parents. We show Principal Davies. We play them the recording. When they hear that, they can't call us liars anymore. They'll have to listen. It was a compromise. It was the logical, responsible, adult thing to do. It was the last time any of them would trust the adult world. The vindication tour was a disaster. Chloe went first. She sat her parents down in their minimalist living room. Mom, Dad, I need you to listen to this. This is what we heard. Please, just listen. She pressed play. They heard Chloe's voice. We believe you. And the whisper, believe you. Her mother's face went white. Her father stood up. Then came the vortex. The awful, digital screech of pain. The sound of Ryder's voice. Disgusting. Her father ripped the recorder from her hands and slammed the stop button. That's enough, he said, his voice trembling with a cold fury. That is vile. See, Chloe said, tears in her eyes. It's real. Real, her mother said, her voice thin. Chloe, that is obviously a fake. A vicious, cruel prank. Ben is very clever with computers. He made this. To scare you. To mock that poor Vance family. You are done seeing him. You are done with this. This is sick. You're grounded. Indefinitely. Josh's attempt went no better. His father, a tech CEO, listened to the recording with a bored, analytical expression. He heard the vortex. He heard Ryder's voice. He sighed and hit stop. That's a ring modulator audio effect, Josh, with a bit crusher filter. It's a standard feedback loop. I'm impressed. The mimicry is a good vocal sample. But it's a prank. Dad, it's not a prank. I saw it. The thermal drone was clean. You stole my thermal drone? You are grounded. For the drone, and for this cruel attempt to stir up trouble. Give me the recorder. You've lost your privileges. Josh, defeated, handed over a copy of the audio file, not the original Tascam recorder. The final, and most crushing, defeat came on Monday. The three of them, suspended, were in Principal Davies' office. They had requested the meeting. We have something you need to hear, Ben said, his voice respectful. We know you didn't believe us. But this is the proof. He pressed play. Principal Davies sat behind her large, organized desk, her face a mask. She heard Chloe. She heard the whisper. When the vortex began, when Ryder's voice echoed through her quiet office, her mask cracked. Her hands gripped the arms of her chair. Her knuckles were white. She was terrified. She let it play for 10 seconds, her face pale, before Ben shut it off.
See,
Ben said, his voice triumphant. It's real. Principal Davies was silent for a long, terrible moment. She composed herself. She folded her hands. The terror was gone, replaced by a cold, administrative fury. This is the most cruel, elaborate, and sickening prank I have ever witnessed in my 20 years as an educator.
what?
Josh said. We didn't. You faked this, she said, her voice rising. You used audio effects. You sampled the voice of a dead boy to what? To get out of a suspension. To incite panic. This is not just a suspension offense. This is grounds for expulsion.
We are not lying.
Chloe cried out. You are, Davies snapped. And you are done. Your 2-week suspension is now indefinite. I am calling your parents. Get out of my office. Get out. They were thrown out of the school, their proof dismissed as a vicious prank. They reconvened at the Ridge Grind, the only place that would have them. They were pariahs. They were suspended. They were liars to the entire world. And they were the only 3 people who knew the truth. They sat in a booth, defeated. I don't get it, Ben said, his head in his hands. I saw her face. She was scared. She believed it. Why is she lying? Because they're adults, Josh said, his voice bitter. It doesn't fit their world. It's messy. It's a problem. They don't want it to be real. So they'd rather believe we're monsters than believe the world has monsters in it. Chloe was quiet, staring into her coffee. It's just like the first time, she whispered.
What?
Josh asked. It's like Evelyn Reed. It's her story, all over again. She had the truth about Jenna Marshall. And the adults, they didn't want to hear it. It was messy. It was a problem. So they buried her. They called her a liar until she broke and vanished. She looked up, her eyes hard. And now, we have the truth. And they're doing the exact same thing to us. The parallel hung in the air, cold and sharp. So what do we do? Ben asked. Just give up. No, Chloe said, a new hard resolve in her voice. We're talking to the wrong people. We're talking to the curators. The Lindis of the world. The people who need the surface to be clean. We need to talk to someone who knows the truth is ugly.
Like who?
Josh asked. Amber Harrison is at Yale.
No.
Not the storyteller, Chloe said. We need the prophet. The one who knew what Ryder was before it happened. The one who warned them. Josh's eyes widened. Dr. Terrence. The Vance family shrink. A new plan formed. They weren't going to a parent or a principal. They were going to the one person left in Cascade Ridge who had seen the myth unfold from the very beginning. They grabbed the recorder. They left the coffee shop. They were going to show the truth to the prophet. Suspended, grounded, and branded as liars, the trio was completely isolated. The adult world had unanimously rejected their truth, choosing a comfortable, rational lie over an inconvenient, terrifying reality. They were, as Chloe had realized, living Evelyn Reed's story in miniature. They had one final desperate idea. One last adult who wasn't part of the curation. The man who had, according to Amber Harrison's blog, predicted the fall of Ryder Vance. Dr. Terrence's psychiatric practice was in a quiet, discreet building of cedar and smoked glass, a few blocks from the main Cascade Ridge shopping center. It was 5 p.m., and the 3 teenagers, all of whom were supposed to be at home, were hiding in the bushes of the manicured landscaping. This is insane, Josh whispered, his breath fogging in the cold. He's a doctor. We're stalking him. He's going to call the cops. He's our last chance, Chloe insisted, clutching the Tascam recorder. He has to listen. He knew Ryder. His last patient is leaving, Ben hissed, ducking down as a well-dressed woman exited the front door. A moment later, Dr. Terrence himself emerged. He looked older, more tired than he had in the photos on his website. He locked the door, adjusted his scarf, and turned to find 3 teenagers standing on the walkway. He stopped, not alarmed, but with a deep, weary sigh. Children. This is not the way to get my attention. I'm afraid my practice is full. We're not here for that, Chloe said, stepping forward, her voice shaking. Dr. Terrence. We're the kids who got suspended. From Cascade Ridge High. I'm aware of who you are, he said, his eyes clinical. The Kallos Echo prank. It wasn't a prank, Ben burst out. And we have proof. Proof, Dr. Terrence repeated, his voice flat. Proof of what? A ghost. We don't know what it is, Chloe said, her voice desperate. But it's real. And it knows him. It knows Ryder Vance. Please. You were his doctor. You have to be the one to hear this. The mention of Ryder's name, spoken with such urgency, broke his professional detachment. He saw the genuine, raw terror in their faces. This was not a prank. This was a trauma. Come inside, he said, unlocking the door. You have 5 minutes. His office was quiet, insulated, and warm, filled with books. It smelled of leather and faint, lemon-scented polish. It was a room of secrets. Sit, he said. They sat on the leather sofa. Ben placed the Tascam recorder on the heavy mahogany desk. You're a psychiatrist, Josh said, the pragmatist. You're not going to believe this. But our parents, the principal, they think we faked it. We just need someone to listen. Then play it, Dr. Terrence said, sitting in his high-backed chair. Ben pressed the button. The room filled with the sound. First, Chloe's voice. We believe you. Then, the impossible, clear whisper. Believe you. Dr. Terrence's face remained passive, but he nodded, slowly. Echolalia, he murmured, almost to himself. Her defining symptom. Her trauma. Ben fast-forwarded. He played the next exchange. Chloe's voice. We're sorry. The whisper. Sorry. Dr. Terrence's eyebrows shot up. A response, he breathed. Not just a mimic. That's new. That's not the proof, Ben said, his hand trembling. This is. He pressed play on the final, terrible file. The vortex of sound erupted into the quiet, professional office. The howl of the wind, the crack of the branches, and then the voice. A young man's voice, cold, sharp, and full of disgust. Disgusting. Stay away from me. Dr. Terrence flinches. He physically recoiled, his hand gripping the arm of his chair. He closed his eyes, his face paling. He was no longer a doctor. He was a witness, remembering the boy in the barricaded room. And then, the sound shifted, the final, heartbreaking lament. Beautiful boy. Farewell. The digital screech of the overload filled the room before Ben, seeing the doctor's reaction, slammed the stop button. The silence that fell was heavier than any sound. The 3 teenagers stared, wide-eyed. You heard it, didn't you? Chloe whispered. It's him. It's both of them. Dr. Terrence did not speak for a long time. He removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. He looked finally like the prophet Tiresias, a man who had seen too much. You children, he said, his voice heavy, have stumbled into the wreckage of a war you don't understand. So it's a ghost? Ben asked, his voice filled with awe. No, Dr. Terrence said, putting his glasses back on. Not a ghost. Not a soul. He looked at them, his eyes full of a profound academic sadness. You have found a wound. You are hearing a scar. I don't understand, Josh said. That place, that ravine. It was the epicenter of 2 profound, parallel tragedies. A woman, Evelyn Reed, who was defined by her voice, was systematically and cruelly silenced. Her entire identity was taken, leaving only an echo. He paused. And on that same spot, she met a boy who was defined by his image. He was so full of himself that there was no room for her. When he rejected her, that trauma, that agony, was so profound, it imprinted itself. It's a psychic echo, an event so painful, it has stained the very place it happened. But Ryder's voice, Chloe asked. How? She heard him, Dr. Terrence said. She was the mirror. She reflected his cruelty back. And when he died, when his own tragedy concluded, that also imprinted. You are not hearing them. You are hearing the memory of their trauma. The vortex. Ben whispered. You triggered it, the doctor said. The others who went there, they went to mock. To get a thrill. They just poked the echo. But you showed it empathy. You said, we're sorry. You broke the loop. And in return, the wound, it showed you everything. All of it. Her pain, the storm, his cruelty, his own final words. It's all just stuck there. Repeating. A new, heavy silence fell. They finally had the truth. So, what do we do? Josh asked, the pragmatist. How do we fix it? How do we set her free? Dr. Terrence gave a small, sad smile. How do you fix a memory, Josh? How do you heal a place? This isn't a person you can talk to. It's an event, trapped on repeat. It's just pain. But the recording, Ben said, gesturing to the Tascam. We have the proof. We can show everyone. We can show the world. We can prove we're not liars. Dr. Terrence stood up, his face hardening. And what then? You will post this. You will prove you weren't liars. And in the process, you will turn that woman's profound, private, and unending agony into a viral video. He looked at the three of them, his gaze piercing. You will send thousands of legend trippers to that ravine, all of them armed with recorders, all of them poking that wound, demanding she perform her pain for them, over and over and over. They will taunt her, hoping to hear Ryder's voice. He looked directly at Chloe. Is that justice? Or is that just a new, more modern, and far more public form of cruelty? The trio was stunned. The choice was suddenly, horribly clear. You have your vindication, Dr. Terrence said, walking to the door. I believe you. But I am warning you, as I warned Linda Vance all those years ago. Bury this. This recording is not proof. It is pain. And if you share it, you are not helping Evelyn. You are becoming her new tormentors. He opened the door for them. They were left with an impossible choice, their own vindication or her peace. The heavy soundproof door of Dr. Terrence's office clicked shut behind them, leaving the three teenagers alone in the quiet, empty hallway. The sterile, fluorescent light felt harsh and cold. They were, once again, cast out, but this time, it was different. They hadn't been dismissed as liars. They had been believed, and then, burdened. They walked in silence to Josh's car and got in. The proof, the Tascam recorder, sat in Chloe's lap, feeling heavier than a bomb. Josh drove, not toward their homes, but aimlessly, through the dark, wealthy, sleeping streets of Cascade Ridge. For 10 minutes, the only sound was the hum of the electric engine. Ben broke the silence. He was vibrating with a new, frustrated energy. So that's it, he said, his voice a low, angry tremor. We just lose? We just let them win. Our parents, Principal Davies, everyone. They get to go on thinking we're monsters who faked a dead kid's voice? We're suspended, we're the town freaks, and we're just supposed to take it. He pulled out his phone. I don't care what he says. He's just a shrink. I have the file. I'm posting it. I'm sending it to Amber Harrison. The truth is the truth. No, Ben, you're not, Josh said, his voice sharp. He pulled the car over, parking on a dark street overlooking the lights of Seattle in the distance. He turned in his seat. Did you hear that thing? Josh said. Did you feel it? That wasn't just a sound. It screamed. It crashed my drone. The drone, Ben. It's military grade. Its sensors were scrambled. That thing it's unstable. It's raw. Dr. Terrence is right. This isn't a game. It's not a ghost. So we have to be the adults. Ben shot back, his face twisting. We're 16. They're the ones who are wrong. I want them to see they're wrong. I want my dad to apologize. And what if he doesn't? Chloe said, her voice quiet but strong. They both looked at her. She was staring at the recorder in her lap. What if, she continued, we post it, and they still don't believe us? What if they say we're the ones who hurt her? Or what if they do believe it? What if Dr. Terrence is right? She looked up, her eyes wet, but her voice steady. I keep hearing her voice. The first one. Sorry. She responded to us. We were kind, and she was sad. And then, we heard her scream. The sound of her whole life falling apart. And now, you want to show that scream to the whole world? So they can laugh at it, or poke it. So they can go viral by taunting a dead woman's pain. She was piecing it together, her voice gaining a new, terrible clarity. Don't you get it, Ben, she said, her voice breaking. That's the whole story. That's what killed her. People using her. Jenna Marshall used her to cover a crime. Ryder Vance, he used her. He used her adoration to make himself feel powerful. He used her as a mirror for his own cruelty. If we post this, if we use her pain just to to get unsuspended, just to be right. She let the word hang in the air. That's disgusting. The word hit them. Disgusting. The same word Ryder had used. The word that had started the vortex. Ben stared at her. He heard it. He saw the chain. The cycle. He finally understood. He was about to become just another tormentor. He slowly lowered his phone, the upload screen glowing. He hit cancel. So, what do we do? He whispered, his anger gone, replaced by a hollow shame. We just delete it? No, Josh said. Not delete. I don't want to. It's the only proof. But we can't share it. We protect it. He looked at Chloe. We bury it. The original file. It was a ritual. It was the only ending that made sense. They drove, not back to the ravine. They would never go back there, but to a small, quiet park on the other side of town. It was an old-growth preserve, a place of peace, not trauma. It was late. No one was there. From the trunk of his car, Josh retrieved a small, black, airtight, and waterproof Pelican case. It was meant for camera equipment. The three of them stood under the shadow of a massive, ancient cedar tree. Ben, his hands shaking, popped the tiny micro SD card from the Tascam recorder. It was so small, so insignificant, to hold so much pain. All that, he whispered. Her, him, the storm, all on this. Let her rest, Ben, Chloe said softly. He placed the card into the foam slot in the case. Josh snapped it shut, the sound final. Josh used a tire iron to dig a small, deep hole in the soft earth, among the roots of the great tree. He placed the black box inside. They covered it with dirt, and then with handfuls of pine needles, until it was invisible. They stood there for a long moment, the three of them, in the dark. They were still the town liars. They were still suspended. Their parents were still furious at them. Nothing in their public lives had been fixed. But they had done it. They had broken the cycle. They had chosen empathy over ego. They had chosen to protect the victim, rather than exploit the pain. They were the only three people in the world who knew the Echo's full story, and they had just become her first true protectors. They walked back to the car, leaving the Echo and her pain to finally be quiet. The decision to bury the proof changed everything, and it changed nothing. They were still suspended. Their parents were still furious. The adult world, which had closed ranks against them, did not suddenly crack open to apologize. Their vicious prank was now, in the eyes of the administration, a closed matter. The trio met, by force of habit, at the Ridge Grind, nursing coffees they didn't want. But the frantic, paranoid energy was gone. In its place was a strange, heavy calm. They had, in their own small way, done the impossible. They had touched a myth, and walked away with their empathy intact. So, Josh said, stirring his cup, my dad's disappointment is real. What did he do? Ben asked, listlessly. Grounded for a month, Josh said. And I have to get a job. He says I have no respect for expensive equipment and too much time on my hands. He's making me work at the Geek Squad. Ben let out a short, surprised laugh. The Geek Squad? At the mall. Yeah, Josh said, a small wry smile on his face. He thinks he won. He thinks he's solved the problem. I don't even care. My dad was the same, Ben said. He demanded I give him the Tascam. He formatted the recorder, in front of me, to erase the evidence of my prank. Ben, he didn't. Chloe said, horrified. It's okay, Ben said, shrugging. I let him. I gave him the recorder. The real SD card was already, safe. But he felt so good about it. He fixed me. He's letting me keep my computer. My mom, Chloe said, she's profoundly concerned about my new fixation on the morbid. She's making me go to therapy. Oh God, Chloe, that's awful, Josh said. With who? Ben asked. Chloe looked at them both. Dr. Terrence. Josh and Ben stared at her, and then all at once, the three of them burst out laughing. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a sharp, ironic, and deeply relieved laugh. The adults had, in their bumbling attempts to control the narrative, perfectly aligned the pieces. 2 days later, Chloe was sitting in the quiet, leather and mahogany office of Dr. Terrence. She was supposed to be a patient, there to be cured of her delusions. "So, Chloe," Dr. Terrence said, his voice in its calm, professional, patient mode, "your mother tells me you've been having trouble, that you and your friends fabricated a very elaborate and hurtful story, and that you are having difficulty letting go of the lie." Chloe sat across from him. She was not a child. Not anymore. She looked at him, her gaze steady. "We didn't lie," she said. "And you know it." A long, quiet moment passed between them. The doctor and the new witness. "We buried it," Chloe said, her voice soft. "The SD card. The recording. We put it in a waterproof box, under a big cedar tree in the North Preserve. We didn't spread it." Dr. Terrence let his professional mask fall. He leaned back in his chair, and a genuine, profound, and deeply sad smile touched his face. "I thought you might," he said. "That was the hardest choice, wasn't it? To be right, or to be kind." "We chose to be quiet," Chloe whispered. "Like, we wanted her to be. But I have to know, will she be quiet now? Did we help her at all?" Dr. Terrence took a long breath. You did something profound, Chloe. You heard her pain. You listened to it. And then, you chose not to exploit it. You honored it. You can't heal a scar like that. A trauma of that magnitude, it stains the world. It's still there. And it will always be there." "Oh," she said, her heart sinking. "But," he continued, leaning forward, "you can stop poking it. You can stop feeding it new voices, new pain. By letting it be, by protecting it from the world, you've given her the one thing she never had in life. Peace. You've let her rest. In her own tragic way, you are the first true friend she has ever had. That is a heavy burden. But it's a good one." The suspensions were eventually lifted. The trio returned to Cascade Ridge High, and the world just moved on. They were, for a week, the Kallos Trio. The kids whispered, "Did you hear? Davies made them delete the ghost file. I heard Josh's dad took his drone forever. My brother said they actually cried in the principal's office. But then, there was a new scandal. A math teacher was dating a parent. The football team lost a game they should have won. The story of the Echo faded, just as they had hoped. And the trio, they changed. Ben, having tasted the power of real audio, did start a podcast. But it wasn't a ghost hunting show. It was called Ridge Rhythms, a quiet, thoughtful show about local musicians and music theory. He was using his skills to create, not to wound. Josh, to his own profound surprise, liked his job at the Geek Squad. He was good at it. He was good at fixing things, at helping the same adults he had railed against. He was humbled. He was no longer a pragmatist. He was a helper. And Chloe, she kept her appointments with Dr. Terrence. Her mother stopped paying after the required 3 sessions, but Chloe kept going, paying with her own babysitting money. She said it was for school stress. In truth, she had found her mentor. She was learning about why people break. It was spring, almost a year since their first terrified legend trip. The 3 of them were in the park. The North Preserve. The sun was out. The fog was gone. They were just being teenagers. Throwing a frisbee. Laughing. Josh threw it too wide. The plastic disc sailed, landing in the soft bed of pine needles, right at the base of the massive cedar tree. Ben ran to get it. He stopped, his foot inches from the spot where the box was buried. He picked up the frisbee. He stood there for a moment. "You guys," he said, his voice quiet. "Do you ever wonder if she's still stuck?" Josh walked over. "Dr. Terrence said she's a scar," he said. "So, yeah, I guess she's still there." Chloe came and stood with them. She looked at the spot, then at her friends. "Yeah," she said softly. "But she's quiet. And she's safe. Because of us." Ben looked at her, and then at Josh. The shame of being the town liars was completely gone. "You know," Ben said, a real smile spreading across his face. "I don't even care that they never believed us." "Me neither," Josh said. Chloe smiled. They had healed. Ben tossed the frisbee, and the game went on. 10 years. In Cascade Ridge, 10 years was long enough for a myth to settle into history. The Cascade Ridge tragedy was no longer a fresh scandal. It was a story told by parents to warn their children away from the Kallos ravine. Amber Harrison, the nemesis who had witnessed and chronicled the fall, was now an investigative journalist for an East Coast magazine, her career built on the very principles of truth that Evelyn Reed had died for. Josh, Chloe, and Ben, the Kallos trio, were long gone from Cascade Ridge High. They were in graduate school and at their first jobs, scattered across the country. Their shared secret, the audio file buried under a cedar tree, was a distant, formative memory that had bound them like siblings, and taught them a hard lesson about kindness that the adult world had failed to. The Kallos Echo, thanks to their pact of silence, had faded. The wound was still there, but it was no longer being poked. It had become a quiet, dormant scar. The story was over. But in a sterile, white room in the dry, flat quiet of eastern Washington, the man at the center of the myth was still alive. Barely. The Columbia Basin Care Center was a place of profound, humming silence. It smelled of bleach, warm broth, and the faint, papery scent of old age. It was here that Ryder Vance, now 28 years old, had spent the last decade. He was not the golden boy. He was not the beautiful boy. The man in the bed was gaunt, his skin a pale, sallow gray. His dark hair, once his glory, was thin and patchy. He was a man who looked 50. He was a body, kept alive by machines and methodical care. His eyes, the gray-blue that had captivated so many, were open. But they saw nothing. They were fixed, always, on a blank, white wall, his final, perfect, empty pool. Linda Vance was here. She was in her late 60s now, her face a mask of surgical perfection, her body thin and rigid in a black Chanel suit. She made this pilgrimage once a month. It was her duty, her burden. She sat in the vinyl chair beside his bed. The room was silent, save for the quiet beep, beep, beep of his heart monitor. "The market is terrible, Ryder," she said, her voice crisp, as if reporting to a stockholder. "I sold the Arizona condo. The sun was too much. I'm in Palm Springs now. I saw the Chengs. You remember them. Their son, the one you used to beat in crew? He's a lawyer. Married." Ryder, of course, did not respond. He never had. Not once in 10 years. Linda sighed. The ritual of the visit was complete. Almost. From her expensive leather handbag, she retrieved the object. His old smartphone. She had kept it charged, all this time. It was her shrine. Her voice, which had been cold and repertorial, softened. It became a coup. "Look, darling," she whispered. She turned the phone on. The screen glowed to life. The lock screen. The image. The perfect, 18-year-old golden boy, smiling in the mist of the Kallos woods. She held the glowing screen up to the face of the 28-year-old, dying man. "Look how beautiful you were," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the phone. We were so perfect, weren't we?" His dull, catatonic eyes did not move. He did not see the image. The beloved in the glass, the obsession that had burned his mind to ash, had no power over him anymore. He was beyond it. He was empty. A nurse, a young, kind woman, entered softly. "Mrs. Vance." Linda snapped her head up, angry at the intrusion. "Mrs. Vance," the nurse said, her voice gentle. "The doctor, he'd like to see you. It's about his vitals. They're failing. His heart it's very weak." An hour later, Linda was standing beside the bed. A quiet, grim doctor was on the other side. The beep, beep, beep of the monitor was slower now. Faltering. Beep, beep. Linda was not looking at her son's face. She was staring at the monitor. She was furious at the machine. She was angry that this last piece of him, this technicality, was failing her. She felt the same cold, rising annoyance she had felt when the caterers for her party had been late. Beep, beep. The long, flat, unmythological tone filled the room. "Time of death, 2:14 p.m., the doctor said, his voice low. "He's gone, Mrs. Vance. I'm very sorry for your loss." Linda Vance stood perfectly still. She looked down. She saw the body. The thing. The failure. The gaunt, hollow-cheeked man who had ruined her life, who had let himself break, who had failed to be the masterpiece she had created. This wasn't her son. This was the sickness. Then, she looked at her own hand, which was still clutching the phone. The screen was still glowing. The image of the 18-year-old boy, perfect, triumphant, and eternal, smiled back at her. This was her son. She turned to the doctor, her face a mask of calm, corporate control. "Thank you, doctor," she said, her voice cold. You can have the body donated to your facility. For research, or whatever it is you do. I will not be holding a service. There's nothing to bury. The doctor and nurse stared at her, horrified. Linda Vance walked out of the room. She did not look back. That evening, she was on a private jet back to Palm Springs. She sat in her new sterile white condo, a glass of wine in her hand, looking out at the desert sunset. She picked up the phone. She turned it on. The beautiful boy smiled at her. The man, Ryder Vance, was dead. The failure was gone. But Narcissus, the image, the flower, he was immortal. There you are, darling, she whispered to the glowing screen, a small, tight smile on her face. Perfect. Forever. 10 years had passed. The Kallos Echo had faded from a terrifying, active legend into a quiet, dormant myth, a campfire story that had lost its teeth. The keepers of the secret, Josh, Chloe, and Ben, had kept their promise. The wound in the woods had been left alone, and in being left alone, it had grown quiet. Chloe, now 26, was a clinical psychology graduate student. Her path, inevitably, had been guided by the two figures who had defined her youth, the woman who was a wound, and the man who knew how to listen to one. She was interning, of all places, at the small private practice of a semi-retired Dr. Terrence. She was in Cascade Ridge, visiting her parents, sitting at the ridge grind with a coffee. It was the same diner, but she was a different person. She was scrolling through her newsfeed when an alert from a familiar source popped up. Amber Harrison's investigative blog. Amber was a star at the New Yorker now, but she still maintained the blog, The Tale of Cascade Ridge, as an archive. This was the first new post in years. The headline was simple, stark, and clinical. Ryder Vance, the golden boy at the center of the 2015 Cascade Ridge tragedy, died today in a long-term care facility. He was 28. Chloe's breath caught. He was gone. She had spent a decade protecting the wound he had inflicted. She had studied the shape of his trauma, his pathology, with Dr. Terrence. And now, the man himself was finished. A strange, electric feeling shot through her. A feeling of completion. She put her coffee down. She stood up. She knew, with an instinct she couldn't explain, that she had to go. Not to the grave under the cedar tree. To the ravine. She drove to the Kallos trailhead. It was a beautiful, clear, sunny afternoon. The fog, the dread, the weight of the place, was gone. It was just a park. She hiked the trail, the same one she had run in terror, and later walked in grim determination. Now, she just walked. The birds were singing. The air smelled of pine and warm earth. The feeling of being watched was absent. The woods were just woods. She arrived at the ravine. It was just a ravine. A beautiful, deep, geological cut in the earth, the creek rushing, far below, in the sunlight. The oppressive, heavy, listening silence was gone. She stood at the edge, the same spot where she had, as a girl, called out in terror. She was not afraid. "Evelyn," she said, her voice soft, conversational. "Evelyn Reed." She waited. She heard the wind in the high branches. She heard a hawk call, far overhead. She heard the actual physical echo of her own voice, bouncing off the far rock wall. "Reed? Reed." But she did not hear the echo. The mimic, the whisper, the presence, was gone. Chloe smiled, a slow, sad smile. He's gone," she whispered to the empty air. "Ryder. He died today. I don't know if you know that, but it's over. He's free. And I hope you are too." She felt a profound, peaceful sense of closure. The scar had healed. His death, the final physical end of the Narcissus tragedy, had somehow released the echo trauma. The imprint was gone. She had come to check on a ghost, and had found only nature. She turned to leave, her heart full of a strange, bright, and beautiful grief. It was truly, finally, finished. She took one step, and she heard a sound. It was not her voice. It was not a mimic. It was not a vortex of pain, or the sound of a storm, or the voice of a cruel, dead boy. It was a new sound. A single, clear, original word, spoken in a calm, rich, alto voice. It was the voice from the old podcasts. The voice of Evelyn Reed, before the curse. And it was not a reflection. It was a statement. Free. Chloe froze. She did not turn around. She didn't dare. She didn't need to. Tears, hot and sudden, streamed down her face. But they were not tears of fear, or of sadness. They were tears of pure, unadulterated release. The curse was broken. The wound was healed. The echo was gone. Evelyn Reed had, after more than a decade of silence, spoken her first and last original word. Chloe did not look back. She kept walking. She walked out of the woods, which were now just woods. She walked into the sunlight, leaving the quiet, empty, and finally healed ravine behind her forever. The myth was over. My name is Amber Harrison. When I started writing this story, I was a 17-year-old girl, sitting in my bedroom in Cascade Ridge. I was consumed by a righteous, teenage fury. I thought I was writing a story about revenge. I had, with a single spiteful social media post, demanded that the universe punish a cruel boy. The universe, to my unending horror, had listened. So I began to write. I thought that by writing it, I could, I don't know, expiate my own guilt. I became the nemesis who recorded the facts. I thought I was writing a story about a tragedy. I documented the fall of Ryder Vance, the golden boy who had been hollowed out by his own reflection. I uncovered the story of Evelyn Reed, the woman who was so cruelly silenced that she became a silence. I watched my town, a place obsessed with perfect, clean surfaces, become haunted. 4 years, that's what I believed the story was. A tragedy. A modern myth about the poison of narcissism and the agony of its victims. And then, the story changed. A new generation, 3 kids, Josh, Chloe, and Ben, stumbled into the wreckage. They, like all of us, were drawn to the legend. They, like me, were disbelieved by the adult world. They were punished, suspended, and called liars, even when they held the proof of the haunting in their hands. They had every reason to be angry. They had every reason to seek their vindication. They could have released their recording. They could have proven us all wrong. But they didn't. They did the one thing no one else in this entire sorry saga had ever done. They chose empathy over ego. They listened to the advice of Dr. Terrence, the town's quiet prophet. They heard Evelyn's pain, her literal, recorded agony, and they chose not to exploit it. They chose not to use her trauma to serve their own pride. Instead, they protected her. They buried their proof, their vindication, in the cold, dark earth. They silenced the story, not to hide a crime, but to heal a wound. They let her rest. I am a journalist now. I trade in facts and proof. I have built my career on exposing the truth. But the greatest lesson I ever learned, I learned from them. Sometimes, the most powerful act is not to share a truth, but to guard it. Today, the story of Cascade Ridge is, finally, over. 10 years after his fall, Ryder Vance died. His physical body, the vessel for that perfect, destructive image, simply stopped. I learned from a source that his mother, Linda, refused the body. She had it donated, unceremoniously, to a research facility. The man was disposable to her. She flew back to her home, where she still keeps his old phone. She worships the image, the flower that will never wilt. She is the eternal curator of a perfect lie. In our modern world, she is the ultimate high priestess. She proves the moral of Ryder's life, that we have, tragically, begun to value the reflection more than the person. But that is not the end. I spoke this week to Dr. Chloe Davis, the Chloe from the Kallos trio. She is a psychologist now, a colleague of Dr. Terrence, a keeper of the quiet. She told me that on the day Ryder Vance died, she felt a pull. She went back to the ravine, the one place she and her friends had sworn never to return. The woods were quiet. The haunting was gone. The scar that Dr. Terrence had described, the psychic, traumatic imprint, had faded. The death of the man who inflicted the wound had, at last, released the victim. Chloe stood at the edge of that empty, sunlit ravine. She whispered goodbye to the ghost that was no longer there. And she told me that for the first and final time, Evelyn Reed spoke back. Not a mimic, not a reflection, not a vortex of pain. A single, new, original word. The voice of the podcaster, the voice of the woman, clear and calm, free. When I started this, I thought it was a story of revenge. Then I thought it was a tragedy. But now I know. It was a love story. A strange, terrible, and modern love story. It was a story about the love of an image, and the echo of that love's cruelty. And in the end, it was a story about the only thing that can heal such a wound. Not more noise. Not more proof. Not more content. It was the quiet love of 3 strangers who chose to protect a victim's pain rather than exploit it. The myth of Narcissus is a warning about what happens when we love only ourselves. But the story of the Kallos trio is the answer. It is a lesson. It is a lesson about what happens when we, finally, choose to love someone else's peace more than our own pride. The story is over. The echo is quiet. May we all be so free.